Hello, everyone. Hello, YouTube. YouTube, you can see them now. Chat has been very normal. They've been behaving themselves. They've been very good little boys, girls, and, you know, other genders. And that's going to continue throughout this entire thing. As we go over the first act of Arcane Season 2, we'll tackle some analysis of the imagery and the themes and the stuff that's being presented. We'll talk about the character arcs of, yeah, see, they're being normal. They're being so normal. We'll tackle some of the character arcs, some of the themes that are being set up. I'll do my predictions about where this is going to go, and I'm going to be trying very hard to restrain myself. I'm going to have trouble with it, but I'm going to try very hard to restrain myself away from just doing fucking a full 9-hour animation breakdown of Act 1. Because that's for later. I won't do that now. Probably. I'm gonna try. I will try very hard not to just do an animation breakdown, because we do have a whole bunch of footage from the episodes that I want to talk about, that I want to use as a basis for my discussion. And we're going to start with the intro. The intro is quite interesting, because there's a bunch of stuff going on here. We start with, and I think the intro for Season 1, I never felt like it was really that thematically informative for the series. It was like the characters as statues, sort of in iconic poses, doing things. There was a limit to how much I think it was trying to say about what this season is going to be about, right? It was more about establishing the monumentalism of it. That this is a big story about things that are like rendered in white marble and so on. Season 2 takes a much more active role in the intro being like, we're going to tell you exactly what's going to happen throughout the entire fucking series, and just like tease you by presenting that information to you like in a non-explicit way. So we start with Vi wiping away her own name, right? Which, like, as I've said before, Arcane is not a subtle show. Vi wipes away her own name, right? Because that part of her identity is going to die in this season. We'll talk about that when we get to the Caitlyn and Vi section. And as she leaves the frame, she leaves downwards, right? Like, she's sinking into the frame, sinking down deeper as Jinx rises, right? And that's very much, again, Arcane loves this shit. Arcane is a show that's all about parallels, all about things that parallel, mirror, reflect, and invert one another, right? So in Season 1, we had this parallel arc, right? Like where Viktor, where Jayce starts very low. He starts losing his research, losing his laboratory, losing his position. He's like on the brink of suicide. And then Act 1 is all about Jayce rising, right? Like Jayce, like he finds a partner who's willing to work with him, a potential boyfriend. He gets like interest from Mel. He gets like support from the council. He like, all this stuff happens. And then eventually he breaks all the rules. He invents Hextech, and hooray! Everything's successful and sunshine and rainbows for Jayce. Parallel to that, everything just keeps continuously getting worse and worse and worse and worse for Vi and Powder, right? Like, everything in their lives just, like, starts like, okay, they have a solid family, right? They're poor, but they're together. They have a family. They have a family dynamic. They have stability. They have Vander, like, they have a parent. Hooray! And then by the end of it, everyone's dead, and the sisters have been torn apart by forces beyond their control, right? Arcane is like this everywhere. And so I think we're gonna get to see a parallel here, right? That we get to see a parallel of Vi falling into the deepest, darkest state she's ever been in. They've kind of already shown us that with like the alcoholism arc that she gets in that music video. But Jinx, by contrast, is gonna rise. And she's going to like find herself and find an identity that isn't entirely tied to like her relationships to Silco and Vi, that's like tied to something other. She's gonna find some other way to define herself rather than just by her traumas and the pain that's happened to her. And again, parallels being parallels, I think it's the same thing for Vi. Like, I think Vi is going to have to find an identity that isn't all completely tied at the hip to both Jinx and to her memory of Vander, which is why she's going to have to fight him eventually, probably in Act 2. So, falling Vi, rising Jinx, right? And this entire intro, to me, I was searching for what the fuck this intro was reminding me of in terms of its aesthetics. And after asking about it a little bit, I had this image in my head of a play that I think I saw on TV a million years ago. It might have been a ballet, it might have been a fucking modern dance production, I don't remember. But where it was a bunch of actors in these very sparse, hyper-minimalist sets, right? Where the actors were basically just not wearing anything in terms of costumes, just the very, very basics. There was no background, there's no anything. And this is reminding me of that. This is reminding me of, like, physical theater. It's reminding me of ballet. It's reminding me of theater and theatricality. And that very much seems to be on the show's mind here. Theater, performance, costumes, that seems to be a major thing in evidence in the thematics, even in Act 1, but in the season in general. Costume is going to be incredibly important for a lot of these characters. And that is at least in part because of the interference of LeBlanc, right? Like, that's because we have LeBlanc, who's a character who is literally made of masks, right? Who can be anywhere, be anyone. It's definitely Black Rose stuff, but I think it also relates to the characters, like changing costumes, becoming different people, that sort of thing. Heimerdinger even wears a mask at one point. Then we have Ekko with his shadow. Tick, 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 because time, right? So this is the minute hand, this is the hour hand, the little one, and then there's a second hand. Oh, it's a clock because of Ekko time powers, which also, again, time travel. There's gonna be time travel in the show. How much of it? Hopefully not too much. Hopefully not a lot. But there's gonna be, and the show is being, like, it's kind of fucking teasing it. Then we have this fucking Phantom of the Opera ass bullshit, right? Like, this is, like, again, the mask here, theater, right? I think of Phantom of the Opera when I see, like, it's not a half mask, but it's laying there on the ground, like, in the dark. That's very fucking Phantom of the Opera. Of course, this is Viktor, who's reaching for a mask. The mask is also an interesting thing, because it can mean different things, right? Depending on how it's applied. A mask is usually a thing about a false front, right? Like a false facade underneath which is a real person somewhere, right? Which, okay, maybe right now that he's in, and we're going to spoil the whole season, by the way, in case anyone didn't know that already. In case, where was I? I lost my train of thought. Right. It can either mean that there is a mask on top of someone's face and then a real person beneath, right? That they're hiding away or something. It can also be about, like, literally he's putting on a human face, right? It could be Viktor is no longer a human being, right? He's no longer a person. He just simply isn't. Because he's been merged with the Hex Core, he no longer has a human soul. He's gone, right? But he's going to put on a human mask and pretend to be real as he sort of takes on the role of Herald of the Glorious Evolution. That's a possible interpretation. I don't think that's necessarily true. My read is that the mask is much more about Viktor, like, it's much more about Viktor's humanity being hidden away, right? I think the mask in this instance is the Hex Core. I think the mask is, I mean, also autism coded, as people are saying, like, definitely. The mask, I think, is the role that's being imposed upon him by the Hex Core, which is trying to make him give it more sacrifices. I think that's what the Hex Core is doing. And underneath that facade, underneath all of this, like, I am now Hex Tech Jesus nonsense that he's got going on, there's a real person still in there who wants to break out from underneath. But we do also get this tiny little flash of, hey, guess who else wears a mask? Oh, hey, there's another mask in the show with a person who wears a mask. And it's dear Ambessa, who is, I have normal feelings about. Sitting here lounging, this looks Shakespearean to me in 100 million ways. Holding a black rose in her hand, which she's slowly trying to crush, right? Like, which, that's fairly obvious. She's in conflict with the black rose. She wants to destroy it. She wants to crush it. But there's going to be a complication with that for poor Ambessa, which we'll see later. Then we get here, right? This is Caitlyn wearing, like, a fucking turtleneck. Literally wearing a turtleneck. Like, some, like, nothing in the universe is more fucking stage-coded than person wearing a turtleneck. That's a theater kid. That's fucking theater actor shit. Wearing a turtleneck, about to step out from behind the curtain, right? Which, again, seems to mirror, certainly, her behavior in Act 1, that she's about to step out onto the stage. She's about to step into the limelight and take power, take control, be in charge of things for a while. And that parallels what we see with poor Jayce, who also gets the spotlight right in his head, but who's very much not happy with it. He doesn't want the spotlight anymore. It's blinding, it's unpleasant, it is making him vulnerable. He shies away from it, right? Because Jayce is stepping back as a counselor, Caitlyn is taking over as a fucking general, and she's not unhappy about that, or at the very least, she's putting on a happy face about it, even though she does seem to have some reservations about it before she steps out, right? So that's definitely there. That, like, Jayce is now tired of the spotlight. He just wants to be in the laboratory with his his partner. Right? And he doesn't get to do that because, well, your actions have consequences, dear boy. And those consequences are going to be nasty. And then we have the petals. There's a lot of fucking flowers in this season already. There's a lot of flowers, there's a lot of petals, there's a lot of plant imagery going on. I can't parse all of it. I'm not really versed in the language of flowers and things like that. There are semiotics, there are parts of visual language that are, like, coded in flowers. Flowers can mean different things in different contexts. Arcane certainly uses them very actively. Again, not the least because of fucking Black Rose, right? In Season 1, it was animal symbols. In Season 1, it was the moth for Viktor. He's also gonna emerge out of a chrysalis. The firelight for Ekko, the crow for Jinx, so on and so forth. In this season, it seems to be flowers. The purple petal there in particular, for Caitlyn, the purple petal is a signifier of her mother, right? Like, that one's tied very much to her mother and her mother's death. The black petals would be the Black Rose. There's other plants and flowers happening elsewhere. I haven't formed a full impression or opinion or analytical idea of what exactly they mean, but they're here. They're hanging out. They're active. Anyway, Ambessa, satisfied, sort of trying to crush the Black Rose, but then we cut to Mel, right? As Ambessa is crushing in on the Black Rose, we get this match fade to Mel, her head where the rose was, as Ambessa puts on the pressure on the rose. You see how hands close in around Mel's head as well, almost as though this pressure leads to that pressure, this thing leads to that thing. They are sort of related in their visual language. Interesting. Almost as though Ambessa, in trying to protect her family, and Mel in particular, by doing everything she's doing, is only exposing Mel to more danger, more pressure, and forcing her to choose a side. That's the other thing here, right? Like, we have this bisection of Mel right down the middle, which is like, oh, she's split between two sets of loyalty, she's split between sides, she has to pick a lane to be in, someone to fight for, and she might not be able to, like, she's not going to be able to save everyone, right? And she has all this pressure coming in, eclipsing her, shadowing her, grasping at her, and, like, dragging her down into shadow, which, again, happens in Act 1. We see that immediately. Then we have Jinx. Do you hear the people sing? Literally doing fucking Les Miserables. Like, very much doing Les Miserables, because, again, Vi falls, Jinx rises. She's going to become the leader of Zaun. She's going to become the revolutionary, if not actively being a leader who wants to be there, at least she's going to be the symbol. She's going to be the thing they put on the posters. She's going to be the thing they put on, like, their propaganda. She's the one taking a stand against the oppression of Topside. Sevika is going to have an active hand in that, I think. She's gonna make that fucking happen. And so you see Jinx, but then she's also flanked by this army of more Jinxes, right? Like, people who imitate her, who look up to her, who do as she does, and, like, have her back, basically. Which, again, comports with a bunch of the imagery we've seen in the trailer so far. Jinx is gonna be the revolutionary leader of Zaun. And we also get to see that Jinx is not so sure about that, right? It's this thing of she's looking up at this flag of Zaun, this responsibility she's been given, and there's more than a little powder in her expression there. And she doesn't look sure of it. She's not like, yeah, fuck yeah, this fucking revolution, let's do shit. Not even like Caitlyn, who's, like, smiling as she steps out to the stage. There's uncertainty here. Then we get Vi, cross-cutting from Jinx to Vi. Again, we get the V, but we also get an arrow pointing downwards. And then we get this. Two hands touching. Gee, I wonder whose hand it is that Vi is touching. Can't imagine. Oh, hey, look who that is. We have Caitlyn there, and there's a lot of this tension between them. They're very close to each other, and they go in for the hug, and then, oh no! Oh dear. Oh, man. Oh, they broke up again. Oh, that's the 8th time this week. Again, the imagery being, these two people are desperately attracted to each other. They want to be together, but they also push each other away from one another. In particular, Caitlyn, but I don't think Vi is gonna... Like, I think we have 2 more acts to go. I think Vi is gonna have an opportunity to reject Caitlyn a couple of times as well. But I think imagery like this also means that they're probably gonna... If Caitlyn doesn't die, which she might, because she seems to be kind of set up as one of the major villains of the season, I do think you include imagery like this when there's a thing of, like, they're gonna break up and then get back together. Like, I have some hope about it, right? And we cut to Caitlyn having less of a great time, being maybe not so happy, wearing the fucking crown. Again, I believe there's a production of Macbeth that has, like, a poster that does the same thing with, like, the shadow hands crown thing. In this instance, if this is a reference to Macbeth, that would make Ambessa Lady Macbeth. And everything turns out great for Ambessa, for Lady Macbeth in that play, by the way. Like, she's fine at the end of it. Everything's cool. She's okay. Nothing bad happens to her. And certainly not the consequences of her scheming coming back to kill her. That's not going to happen. And we do get, like, and this, again, I take this for Caitlyn as like, oh, heavy is the crown, right? You have the power now. You have become dictator of Piltover and Zaun. Cool. Turns out maybe that's not so cool. Turns out maybe that fucking sucks, actually. Turns out maybe that puts a little bit of red on your hands, actually. Maybe that's what happens when you do that. So I don't think she's going to have a particularly good time being dictator. But it's again the Macbeth thing. I am in blood so far steeped that to go back would be more tedious than to go over. As I say, misquoting it. Anyway, Ekko's running, and he reverses time. He reverses time because of I don't know. It's probably something to do with he's very acrobatic. I can't tell that this means anything else other than Ekko is just so acrobatic that he can stop in midair and reverse his motions. That's all that means. It doesn't mean there's going to be time travel. Of course not. They're not alluding to the fact that Ekko has time powers and can go back in time. Then we have Mel, right? She's been overwhelmed by these shadows. Everything's closing in all around her. And then she says, actually, fuck you. Fuck off. And she takes the spotlight back. And when she does that, oh, look, she's taken her mother's position. She's in the place where her mother used to be, and her mother is nowhere to be seen. Huh. I wonder what that means. That's probably fine. That's probably not a problem. And look at that. The rose is there. And she picks up the rose. We don't get to see it, but she's picking up the rose, which there's ambiguity here. Does that mean she will pick up the rose to try and crush it again? To try and finish what her mother had started? Or picking it up because of maybe she's like, oh, that's a very nice rose. I'd like to have this rose in my house. And maybe also in my eye, taking over my body. Who knows? Who knows? Could be either one. Like, not who knows? I don't know. But definitely the reading I have here is that Mel is going to assert herself, right? Like, Mel starts certainly Act 1 being very much the victim of things happening to her, like very much out of control, trying desperately to hold on to some kind of agency in a world that's like her mother is trying to deny her agency and control and influence, and then LeBlanc is gonna do her thing. So, but my reading is Mel is gonna come back from this, and she's gonna come back hard, and she's gonna fucking kick some ass. I will be very, very upset, Riot Games. I will be very upset if you're setting all of this shit up to make Mel the new LeBlanc. Like, if it's a fucking, we're gonna tease a fucking visual update for LeBlanc where she just becomes Mel. Please don't do that. Please do not do that. I don't want that to happen. I'd like LeBlanc to be herself. It would be, narratively, it would be cool within the context of Arcane, I think. Like, that would be fine. Not in the main canon. Like, you should not have merged the canons, for fuck's sake. I think that's not impossible. But the visual imagery here says much more that Mel is taking up her mother's position. Right? She's in her mother's position. I think she's gonna take over the family Medarda and the house. I think that's what it's pointing towards. And she's gonna pick up the job of crushing the Black Rose. I think that's where it's going. But there's ambiguity, right? There's like, oh, she could turn out the other way. It could be the other thing. Things could go bad. The spotlight, and then Dear Viktor. Interestingly, the light seems to be coming from the mask itself, putting this thing on over his human face, taking on the savior role. Which, again, that's the thing with Viktor, right? He has been turned into something else by the Hex Core. He's not happy about being turned into something else. He doesn't want to be something else. He asked Jayce to destroy this fucking thing, but now that he has the power... Now that he has it... Yeah, this is Jayce's hand. Now that he has the power... You know, might as well use it to do good, right? You could help people. You could make the world a better place, right? By turning everyone else into that, by making them all the same, by making them all glorious, by making them all evolved, like you, by taking that which is inside you and putting it inside everyone else. Don't be horny about that, chat. Nah, you can be horny about it if you want. And that's the intro, right? I think the intro is spelling out a lot of the themes, a lot of the ideas, a lot of the thoughts, a lot of the points that the season is going to try to make about these characters and where they're going to go. it plays with ambiguity of like, oh hey, maybe who knows what's gonna happen. Maybe Caitlyn's gonna die because she's like looking like, oh, this is painful actually. And she's like, oh shit, I've made a huge mistake, and maybe she's gonna try and back out and she's not gonna be allowed and she's gonna die. Who knows? Like maybe Ekko's gonna get hit by that laser. I don't know. It plays with ambiguity, right? Like Mel might, is she gonna crush the rose or take it up? Or Viktor, is he gonna like reject the hex core, or is he gonna be like come possessed by this idea of turning everyone else into him? And who knows? But it's much more direct in terms of like the thematic hints and foreshadowing that it's doing for the rest of the season. So, the first full character arc throughout Act 1 I want to talk about is Viktor. Because, well, I mean, most characters don't... Caitlyn is the only one who has a full character arc throughout the first act, but I want to talk about like what happens with Viktor, how it happens, why it happens, and like what it might mean, right? Because the first thing that happens to Viktor in Act 1 is that Jayce betrays him. That's the first thing that happens. Granted, Jayce betrays him because he's desperate to save him, but Jayce promised. He promised that he would destroy the hex core. And that's maybe a silly thing to try and make Jayce promise, because, like, we know Jayce. We know what Jayce is like when the people he loves are under threat, right? His morality kind of goes out the window a little bit. He loses his ability to focus, and it leads him to make stupid decisions. Again, I don't blame Jayce. Jayce doesn't know that the hex core killed Skye. He doesn't know why Viktor wanted it destroyed. He thinks Viktor wants it destroyed because, like, oh, it's just bad for the environment or whatever. And he's like, no, Heimerdinger was wrong. It's keeping you alive. Yay, that's great. He doesn't know that it's killed someone, right? So it's not like, but he promised to destroy it. And I like the animation of the hex. No fucking animation breakdowns, but if we take the hex core as a character, and that's very much my reading of character as, like, this thing as a character, is that it has agency, it has personality, it has a want, it has desire, right? It wants to do something. That's like in my fucking animation 5.5 hour animation thing, I made it Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors, because it is like, feed me. That's very much how I see it. So it gets like, there's a corpse there, there's flesh. Oh, I'm hungry. Feed it to me, science boy. Give it to me. In part, I think it's also trying to save him. Like, I think it's both things. I think it is that the hex core senses a meal, right? Like, this is what I've been eating so far. Oh, there's a huge chunk of it over there. Give it to me. But I also think the hex core wants to save him, right? Because in the same way that, like, the Venom symbiote wanted to protect Peter Parker, right? It also wants to eat Eddie Brock, but in a different way. You can imagine that for yourselves. It's like, and it's not just eating, it's not just consumption, it wants to merge, right? I think that's very much what the hex core is looking for, is, as we talked about in Act 1, Viktor poured himself into the hex core, and so he changed it, right? He changed it. It became something very different after he gave it blood, right? And that's what I think they're gesturing at with the wild rune thing, is that he took this thing which was only made of, like, the solid runes that behave themselves and act as like they're supposed to do, and with a little bit of blood, he turned that into a wild rune that just does whatever the fuck it wants, right? And so I think the hex core, like, it wants to eat him in the sense that it wants to become one with him, right? And so you see power being siphoned away from Viktor. Like, you can see it's pulling on him. It's literally pulling from him. But also, the hex core starts to pour itself into him, right? So there's this meeting, there's this merging of the two, right? And Jayce is sort of kind of just along for the ride on this one. And you can see, like, poor Jayce, once again, he's trying to control it, he's trying to hold on to it, he's trying to make sure, okay, I'll get you closer, but you can't have the whole thing. Like, you can have a nibble, you can have a bite, but you can't have the whole thing, and that's unfortunately just not, like, much like Viktor found out when he tried it, you don't get to make a decision about how much the hex core takes when it really wants something, right? So Viktor starts the season with a betrayal, a deep betrayal, that his friend Jayce would not respect his wishes when he wanted something for himself. Like, Jayce's behavior here is selfish. Not that it's not understandable, not that it's like, I would have done the same thing if it was my friend. Like, if it was my friend and I had a thing that could save him, I wouldn't give a shit. Fuck you. Like, I don't care. Like, you alive, not dead? Cool. Worth it. I'm taking that trade, even if you get mad at me. I'm not judging Jayce for this. I'm just saying that from a very sort of dispassionate perspective, this is a betrayal of Viktor's trust, right? And he has now imposed on Viktor a very different existence. He has imposed on Viktor a fundamental change to his body and his nature, right? That Viktor didn't ask for. And Jayce then has the temerity in their confrontation to be like, I never asked for this. Yeah, neither did he. He, in fact, asked for explicitly, let me die. He told you to, and you didn't do that. So when Viktor is pissed with him, which I think he is, it's understandable from Viktor's perspective also, right? Like, it's understandable why Jayce did what he did. Of course he did. He loves him, right? Of course he did. But Viktor also has a right to be, like, not very happy about it. And chat has a right to be very normal about Viktor and his new body. Yeah, regular, ordinary. And it's interesting to me that, like, the moment Viktor touches his staff, or his cane, oh yeah, this thing gets changed right away, right? Like, it's... The hex core doesn't wait. He's holding on to this thing. It needs to be better for him. It's just going to get longer. It's going to get bigger. It's going to change texture. It's going to become like the shepherd's crook because Viktor needs to be, you know, hex tech Jesus. We'll talk about that once we get there. And the confrontation between the two of them, I think, is particularly interesting because Viktor starts with eye contact, right? Viktor starts by looking at Jayce, by being interested in him, by like, Jayce, what am I? What happened? Right? Like, looking for answers. Once he gets them, his affect changes, right? And poor Viktor, this is the other thing. One complaint I saw about Act 1 is that Viktor has no agency in this act. And that's true. Viktor has no agency. He's being led around by the nose by other things, right? Like, in part, that's Jayce's fault. Like, he had no agency in what Jayce chose to do to him. And now that he has this thing merged to him, he talks about, like, I don't feel cold, I feel a potentiality. I think, like, it's cold, it's not his name, right? His sensory apparatus has been changed. The whole way that he experiences the world has been changed. So he's still confused. He still doesn't know who or what he is. He doesn't know who or what he's feeling. He doesn't know why he's seeing the things he's seeing or feeling the things that he's feeling. So he's very reactive, right? Like, he's like a newborn, essentially. He was born today. Right? He was reborn, in fact. He died and was reborn. In fact, he died and then he was reborn and now he's walking around with a shepherd's crook, healing people by laying hands on them. This reminds me of something, but I can't think what it is. But he was literally just born today. He's a newborn, right? So he doesn't know anything. He doesn't have any agency yet because he doesn't have any sense of himself yet, which is, again, this thing of identity, which if Caitlyn and if Vi and Jinx in particular can have arcs that are about discovering who they are when they don't have only each other to form their identities around, like when Vi has to be about something other than just I have to save Powder, when Powder kind of isn't really the only, like, you can't save Powder anymore. She's like, there isn't just Powder left to save. There's Jinx now. And Jinx on the same play, she has to let go of like her whole identity being founded on like just her traumas and the suffering that she went through and become someone who cares about something beyond herself and her own pain. Then I think Viktor is also going to have an arc that's a lot about discovering his identity as he now is, right? Like who and what he has now become, what that means, and what kind of person he's going to have to be to deal with it. And you can see like Jayce hugs him and Viktor doesn't understand, right? There's this like surprise and like confusion. Is like, what is this? What's happening? Which I think is in part just because Jayce hugs him and he doesn't know what warmth is anymore, right? He didn't, oh, is that heat? I don't know what heat is. That's a sensation, but I can't tell what it is, right? And he sort of accepts it and then puts the hand on Jayce's back and accepts the intimacy. And then there's, I was supposed to be dead, right? Why am I alive? What happened? He's still looking Jayce in the eyes. And then once Jayce tells Viktor what he did, Viktor's affect begins to change through frustration, sadness, and then he sees Skye. And now he just doesn't really look at Jayce again at all during their interaction. Skye is the only thing he sees, like the only thing he cares about. Everything else is avoidance, right? Looking away, retreating, retracting, walking off, right? Which again, to me, is this thing of like, I think he's being led on, right? Like, I think the Hex Core is making an active effort to separate him from his friend. Again, if we go by my interpretation from season 1, that the Hex Core is kind of like a toxic boyfriend, right? Like it's a toxic relationship at the very least, right? Then the Hex Core needs to get him away from Jayce, who might help him understand himself and like put him somewhere where it can manipulate him emotionally by letting him help people, which is the one thing that Viktor wants more than anything, along with Viktor wants forgiveness for what he did to Skye. He wants redemption. That's the other religious thing about Viktor's imagery in this thing. Viktor's searching for redemption. He's searching for some way to make up for his failures. Literally giving him a halo. The show is not subtle about the imagery, right? But the other way of seeing that is like the Hex Core is giving him this role. The Hex Core is making him a savior. Because isn't it nice to be a savior? Don't you want to become a cult leader? Don't you want to have people worshipping at your feet? Looking up to you? Listening to everything you say? And all Viktor's doing, he's not even tracing his own path. He's just walking in someone else's footsteps, right? He's walking where someone else has already defined that he should go. So I don't think Viktor is in control of this. I think Viktor is reacting and being pulled by things he doesn't quite understand. Like, I don't think he knows what he's about to do when he raises the hand. At least, not the least, because as the hand is being raised, you see that? Like, these little jerks and twitches and stuff? That's the signifier of involuntary movement in animation terms, right? That, like, this is not necessarily something Viktor is doing, perhaps. Maybe that's something he's being pulled to do. And the reward he gets, right? He looks at Huck, who he has saved and cured and made better and all that. And that's cool. But there's also this element in his animation of, like, what did I just do? Like, what have I just done? And then... No, cool. See, Skye says it's cool. Skye says it's good. She says, this is the right thing to do. And if you do that, you're forgiven. There's another part of this, which I can't really play for you because playing the audio complicates things for copyright reasons. But when Viktor is in the goop, in his chrysalis, we hear Skye's voice. But we hear multiple versions of it. We hear Skye saying, Viktor, wake up. You have to go to be Hextech Jesus now. But we also hear her screaming. We also hear her screaming for Viktor. Again, the implication is like, is Skye's soul inside the Hex Core trying to get to him saying, Viktor, for the love of God, like, help! I'm in the Hex Core, get me out! Or is the Hex Core just using her image to manipulate him? It's not clear. Like, it could also be that Skye's soul is in there and she has also been controlled by the Hex Core to go, this is cool and based, actually, let's do this. Who knows? Like, it's not clear. She is missing her glasses, though, which is interesting. Because nearsightedness would be the kind of flaw that the Hex Core would want to cure in humanity, right? Like, disability. Let's get rid of that. Disabled people don't need to exist. We can fix them. We can give them the bodies that we want them to have, that we think they should have, in order to be full human beings. That's the other thing, is like, yes, glorious evolution, curing people of diseases, all very good, but there's also that element of, as we saw in the intro, the identical row of masks, right? Like turning all of humanity into a single ideal. That's eugenics, baby! So, again, I think Viktor's arc in this thing is going to be learning to see through this image. Learning, like, because he's a scientist, right? Right now he's being led religiously. He's being led to religious imagery, but he's also being led to religious acts, right? Acts of faith, acts of feeling. He's a scientist. I think his arc is going to be about rediscovering this thing of like, hang on, what am I actually doing here? What is this? What are the mechanics of this? How does this work? And by the end of it, I think maybe, just maybe, he's going to have to build a whole bunch of robot parts to sort of control what's going on with his body and augment himself with science rather than with magic in order to... Like, I think maybe that's what they're pushing towards. Anyway, chat, how are we feeling about Viktor now? Like, how are we feeling about the teaser poster of Viktor, where he looks a little bit different? Everyone feeling normal? Everyone's like, oh, I wouldn't want Viktor to touch me and change me and, like, reach into my very soul and like, have an effect on me like that. I would hate for this to happen to me. How awful for Viktor to pour himself into me while touching my head gently. and giving me like a cool, badass, gold-skinned quasi-robot form. I would hate that. That would be terrible, right? No one wants that. I'm sure chat are very sensible people who would never prostrate themselves on their knees in front of Viktor and beg him. They wouldn't. Chat wouldn't do that. I know you. You're better than that. So, moving on to Dear Jayce. Because Jayce, the poor boy, cannot catch a fucking break in the first act. Like, just not even a little bit. Everything goes wrong for him, and then it keeps going wrong forever. Which, you know, poor kid. But we open with what I think is probably just some normal glow that happens to be gold and follow the contours of Mel's back. That's just a normal glow, which is ordinary. I don't think there's anything weird about that. That's just how backs glow after they've been shot with a big rocket. Then your back just does that. That's normal. Don't worry about it. And I'm sure Mel has no idea what that is or how it works. And that's why she clearly jumped in front of Jayce to try and protect him. Because she didn't know that would happen and would let her save him. And that's also why Mel seems disoriented and kind of weakened, almost as though that took something out of her at the start. It's because she didn't do anything. Nothing happened. She didn't do anything. Don't worry about it. Don't question it. Especially Jayce. Jayce, don't worry about it. It's fine. Nothing happened. Anyway, Jayce begins in a bad place, right? Council's blown up. His girlfriend is there and hurt, but like sort of okay. And then, yeah, no, it's carnage. Lots of dead bodies everywhere. And then the body of his patron, the mother of one of his best friends, just kind of dead on the floor. So our poor boy, he's not in a good place immediately. Like, he's seeing a lot of people just lost to him. A lot of people who he couldn't protect, who he couldn't defend, where he feels responsible for it, right? Like, he feels responsible for putting them in this room where everything's blown up. And then he sees someone who's maybe a little bit more than a friend. And he makes a decision about what to do about that, right? Fuck you, no one else is dying today because I'm Jayce Tallis and I have a savior complex, right? Remember, this is part of Jayce's fundamental psychology, is that he has a severe savior complex. He has those childhood fantasies of being the magic superhero who saves everyone. He got into Hextech science because he was so like, he had this trauma where his mother almost died, and then he saw this thing that had the capacity to save her, and it's like, I have to be able to save people, right? He has a thing about seeing people he loves die right in front of him or get hurt. And it makes him make decisions sometimes. Just decisions. Just broadly, generally speaking, decisions, right? And the little detail that he's sitting there with Viktor's cane, right? Like, having it leaning up against him, holding on to this thing that signifies Viktor. Right? The cane, by the way, is going to be important in this particular scene because this is also a scene that's about Mel. We're doing a little bit of Mel's character arc here as well. Because Mel, in Season 1, if you remember, she starts the season as like, oh, I am Mel Medarda. I want money and power and influence, and I don't give a shit. Like, I just want things for me because of I like corruption. Corruption's fun. I like seducing cute little college boys and like making them my boy toys so they'll invent cool things for me. But then over the course of the season, she falls in love with Jayce. And Jayce's earnest idealism, Jayce's genuine belief and like desire to make the world a better place for the sake of it, Jayce, who doesn't want power, who just wants to help people, that reminds Mel of her own past, right? Like her own past as a child who had those same ideals, who just wanted to make as good of a world for everyone as she could, and that affects her and it changes her. And remember the thing I said about how I think the Hex Core is hungry and wants to eat as many bodies as it can? Yeah, no, it's looking for more food. So in this scene, right, Jayce is mostly just freaking out about Viktor and freaking out about the situation, and Mel is the one who is handling the political aspect of what's going on. She is the one now who defends Jayce and Viktor's dream. She says, as Jayce sort of freaks out about, like, I promised no more Hextech weapons, never again, I promised it. She says, don't worry, I took care of it. I won't let anyone corrupt your dream. And she pushes the cane into Jayce's chest. She gives Viktor back to him, as it were, right? Like, she says, I support this, right? The two of you together, your dreams, your ideals, I'm with you. Which, you know, that probably doesn't mean that they're gonna have a polycule. It should! It should mean that. Jayce has 2 hands. But the gesture is significant, right? Like, Mel has changed a lot. She's prioritizing someone else's dreams over her own needs. She's prioritizing someone else's wants over her own immediate political interest, right? She has changed a lot. And she has chosen her side, right? And that's important for Jayce because he needs that support. Like, he does this in season 1 as well, like finding comfort in Mel's embrace as like the only escape he has from all of the everything that's going on around him, right? Because Mel did push him into becoming a counselor. Mel did push him to taking power, to taking the spotlight, to going out on stage, to becoming the man of tomorrow, to being the face of Hextech. Mel pushed him to all of that, right? And so correspondingly, he looks to her for support in that, especially when it comes to things that has to do with being in power, being a counselor. And Jayce is tired. He's so fucking tired. He's so exhausted. He doesn't want this anymore, right? He just wants to be in the lab with his his partner. But the consequences of what he did as counselor are coming back to haunt him. And this time, he can't just beat it down with a hammer, right? This time, you can't just do violence at it to make it go away. You killed someone's son, Jayce. That doesn't go away, right? Like, Jayce here is suffering the consequences of his actions, right? Not that it's good, not that it's based or even justified, just like if you go somewhere and you kill someone's child, like, they're probably not gonna just sit there and take it, right? And that's very much sort of a theme of Act 2, by the way, is like Piltover, this thing about vengeance, right? Where Piltover insists, well, we have a right to take vengeance, right? This was done to us, we have a right to strike back, we have a right to retaliate. Zaun does not have a right to retaliate. Like, decades and decades of economic exploitation and poisoning and misery, they don't have a right to strike back for that. They don't have a right to do violence for that. But if they do, like Piltover, invasion, strike teams, poison gas, we can do whatever the fuck you want. Fuck you, right? So there's this undercurrent thematically and politically in Arcane Season 2 about, like, who has the right to take revenge? Who has the right to be vengeful, right? Who gets to do that materially in terms of, like, political power? Who gets to have the privilege of taking revenge? We'll talk about that a lot more once we get to Caitlyn. But, like, Jayce is suffering consequences for his actions. Like, that wound there, Jayce, that was like, yeah, she shouldn't have done that to you, but also, you know, you kill someone's child. But anyway, the point of having this little shot was mostly that when Caitlyn sends Jayce to the forge, like, she's the one who's ordered him in there, right? And he's forging those Hextech weapons even though he doesn't want to, even though he knows Viktor asked him not to. Arcane is not a subtle show. Like, as he's forging, he bleeds more and more and more. He's hurting himself doing this, right? It's painful. He doesn't want it, right? This is not like when he forged the hammer, when he was into that shit. This is against all of his instincts, against all of his promises and all of his wants. And when he's done... Yeah, that's not a look of a man who's, like, satisfied with the work he's done. That's not a look of a man who's like, yay, I made a cool thing. This is a man who's like, Jesus fucking Christ, like, what the fuck am I doing? And then we cross-cut, of course, to Viktor, because that's what this is about, right? Like, he knows, like, I promised Viktor I wouldn't. And that's also in, like, let me just extend this footage. That's also in the show, that's one of the triggers for Viktor to wake up, is when Jayce fully betrays him, right? It's like, Viktor gets out of bed, it's like, I sense my boyfriend has done something stupid. I must go and yell at him. And yeah, like, again, from Jayce's perspective, we talked about this when we talked about Viktor. All he knows is that he took a chance on something that might save his man, right? Like, that might save his friend, his brother, his, you know. That's all he knows, right? He doesn't know that the Hex Core killed Skye. So when Viktor notices it, Jayce is like, no, don't you see? Heimerdinger was wrong. It worked. Like, we were right. Like, this thing that you worked on, your great invention, it saved you. Isn't that great? Isn't that amazing? And it's like, no, Jayce, you didn't know that, but no, like, there's a reason why he asked you to destroy it. And from Jayce's perspective again, right? It's like, I nearly saw you die in front of me. I tried to save you because I love you, right? Like, whatever kind of love you want to think of that as. And then Viktor's just like, I'm gonna leave now. And from Jayce's perspective, right, like, how painful must that be? Right? Because he feels, he's not correct, but he feels that he was pushed into everything that's happened. He was pushed to become a counselor. He was pushed to make the Hex Gate and makes Hex technology. He was pushed to make Hex weapons. He was pushed to all of this. And the moment he takes one selfish action for something he wants for himself, which is to save his best friend, all of a sudden now he has to be blamed for that and be berated for it. Right? I never asked for this. Again, I don't think Jayce is correct in this. Jayce took the power because it felt good. Jayce took the power because it let him get things that he wanted, right? Like, it's not just that he did ask for it, right? He participated, he went along, but from his perspective emotionally, that's not what it feels like, especially when his friend just leaves him without an explanation, without a word, basically. Alone in his laboratory. It's rough, right? And we get that little thing like, have you been sleeping here? And Jayce is like, no. I mean, yes, I guess. And you can already see, like, he's not taking care of himself that much. He's not really doing his hair. He's not really shaving. He's sort of, like, just kind of coping with it, isn't he? And then the humiliation parade continues, because now he's there with Heimerdinger and Ekko, and it's like, hey, Jayce, did you know? The Hex Gate is just poisoning trees and killing things. Isn't it cool how the invention you made is making the world worse instead of making it better? Isn't that great? Oh, that's awesome, right? And he's being confronted specifically by Ekko, which I like. I like that Ekko, for example, is shown to be smart enough to understand everything Jayce is talking about like that, like no problem, right? I like that Jayce is conspicuously nice to Ekko. Like, he's like, well, let's sit down, let's have some tea. He doesn't berate Ekko, he doesn't, like, lord things over him. I like that we are shown that Jayce is a nerd. He's a science boy, that's sort of deep underneath everything else, that's who he is. He's someone who cares about science and technology, and who's trying his best to do things right, even if his privilege is sort of preventing him from being very good at it, right? But anyway, Jayce's arc. Again, this is very much the humiliation parade for the poor boy, like, learning that the things that he has built, everything he's done, these amazing accomplishments that he has created might kind of have been a bad idea, actually. Oh, hey, there's some distortions down there. That's weird. I wonder where that is. Is it just right underneath that big shaft from up top where Viktor was standing in Season 1 and kind of coughed and bled down over the edge, and then some droplets of blood fell down and hit the Hex tech? That's interesting. I don't know if that's necessarily 100% true, but it's a theory. And I just fucking, the psychedelic imagery in the Hex core scenes here, or the fucking Hex, whatever it is, orb. Cool shit. Again, time travel, motherfuckers. That's what this is. That's actions suspended in time repeating themselves. This is literally looking at a timeline, right? Time travel. We're gonna do time travel. But here's the important bit. All of this is flashing through Jayce, right? Like, he touches it finally. And that's the image that comes back, right? The memory of seeing the wizard. Casting the spell, saving his mother. His feelings about that, his desire to have that power to do those things. All comes back. And he realizes, like, what have I done? What have I built? I have made this because I wanted those things, but what have I done? And so he tries. This is Jayce shattering his own dream, right? His whole motivating factor. Everything about himself that was pushing him, that was making him do the things that he's doing, right? All of his ideals, all of his passions, he has to shatter them. And as Chad is pointing out, yes, this is a Rorschach test. A moth is definitely a valid reading of these shapes. I'd say that's pretty accurate. But Jayce, at the end of Act 1, he has to shatter his own dream, right? Not only admit that he's wrong, but like, oh, I have made the world worse for everyone I have ever known. All of my dreams have been corrupted and turned against me. Everything I've ever made is poison. Oh, cool. So Jayce is in a good spot. I think he's emotionally stable, and he's gonna have a nice time in Act 2, because like, oh, I don't have to do Hextech anymore. Cool, I'm just gonna go be a painter and have a good time and be happy. That's what's gonna happen to Jayce, because he's had a good time in Act 1. No, Jayce is gonna crash and fucking burn. Jayce is gonna fall apart at the seams. Once again, Arcane is very much about parallels, right? Like, in the same way that in Act 1, Viktor starts relatively healthy, and then he falls more and more and more apart as the season goes on and becomes weaker and weaker and more desperate. I think maybe that's where Jayce is going to end up as well, that he's going to get more and more fucked up and ruined and desperate, trying to do something to deal with the world. Some desperate act he's going to take, right? That might not turn out good for everyone. By the same token, Viktor's arc, right, is going to, I think, parallel Jayce, where Jayce gets more and more power. He becomes more and more in control of the world. He gains more and more followers. He gains more and more prestige, right? Viktor is going to get himself a little cult that worships him and loves him, and he's going to gain more and more power. He's going to become more and more important, right? And then something's going to happen as a consequence of that that knocks him out of it. And then we're going to have a reconciliation between the two of them, just like we did in Season 1, where they meet at the precipice right as Viktor is about to try and kill himself. Jayce comes along and they have this little chat about how they forgot their dreams and stuff. I think that's going to happen in Act 3 of the show again, because we're doing parallels, right? They're going to have this reconciliation where they both come to terms with the consequences of the things that they've done, right? Whether they're going to come out as that as boyfriends, as friends, lovers, or whether they're going to end up having to try and kill each other, who knows? But they're going to have a moment where they maybe get to reconcile after everything that's happened. So, let's talk about Mel and Ambessa. Specifically, we'll talk a bunch about Ambessa. We'll also talk about, like, what happens to poor Mel, who spends most of the first act, much like Jayce, mostly just reacting against horrible things that are happening to her outside of her control. But Ambessa is a very interesting character, and, like, she's definitely being set up as the main villain of the season, or at least a main villain. I think there might be more than one. But it is a thing of, like, this explosion happens, this attack. The only thing she gives a shit about right now, are you okay? Right. Checking her over, making sure that her daughter is fine. Because Ambessa is not lying when she says that her family is her only motivation, right? Like what she does with that is like, this justifies me doing all kinds of shit that's bad. But Ambessa is acting, I think, sincerely, fundamentally, from a deep and desperate desire to protect Mel. Above all else. That's another reason why I think, like, that's why we have this thing of, like, Mel occupying Ambessa's place in the intro. I think Ambessa's gonna sacrifice herself for Mel before this is over. Because this is the thing that she's here for. She's not really in Piltover for Hextech weapons. She's there to protect her daughter. Like, that's her first motivation. In order to do that, she's like, okay, I must take over this place and control it like a dictator and have Hextech weapons and do war. Because she's a Noxian, this is all she knows, right? But she is here for her daughter. Her son has died. Her estates have been taken from her. All of her control, her power, and Noxus is gone. This is all she has left. She wants to protect Mel with her life. And I think that's honest in her. I've talked about this before, but the detail that the fucking Piltover council chambers are not wheelchair accessible is just like... Mwah. I love that as a little... Of course their architecture wouldn't care about disabled people. Of course it wouldn't. Like their architecture would not be, like, built with the assumption that disabled people need to access it. That's a good detail, right? That there's this architectural assumption that a disabled person will never need to step foot in here, right? Or at least so few of them will that it's not worth building a ramp. It's not worth building accessibility options because, like, it's like, how many of them are ever gonna, like, those people don't belong in here, right? Like, that little world building details, that's, like, good. And it comes back to bite Sallow in the ass, right? Like, that's just so. But yeah, again, Arcane is not a subtle show. Ambessa is pushing him forward as a prop, right? Like, Ambessa is using him as a puppet, literally advancing him into the center of power. And then she's just sitting there, being like, okay, dance, little puppet, dance on your strings. Do the things I want you to do. And so this scene is not really about Sallow. Sallow's barely a character in this scene. This is a duel between Mel and Ambessa, right? Ambessa with her first strike, and then Mel with her, like, objections and her pushback. And you can see it here, right? Like, Sallow, he gets the medium shot, right? Like, this medium shot with Ambessa always in the background. When he finishes talking, then we get Ambessa looking at Mel, challenging her, right? Like, all right, this is my gambit. How are you going to respond? And then it's about, like, Mel finding a way to counter her mother's arguments, finding a way to push back in the power politics, to beat her in this game, right? And the most she can really manage here is like a tie, right? Like, we're not going to invade immediately, completely, like, without any fucking reason. Like, this is a bad idea, but, you know, I'll endorse the invasion, but no Hextech weapons. Because, again, Mel cares about Jayce and Viktor's legacy now. She cares about her boyfriend's dream. She cares about what he wants, right? Like, how he would feel about it. So she's saying, okay, I'll endorse the invasion, but no Hextech. Like, this is a line I will not cross, right? Stepping into the ring, fighting back her mother's assault. And Ambessa is not happy about it, and this is the moment that Ambessa is like, okay, go get the Chem Baron. Right? This is the moment when she decides to do that. This is the moment when she's like, okay, we need to push a little bit more, so let's take a calculated risk. That's the thing that Mel mentions about Ambessa also. Everything with Ambessa is a calculated risk, right? Which means it could go wrong, but she's banking that she's good enough to make sure that it won't. The attack on the memorial ceremony is very much a calculated risk from her, right? Like, because people could die. Her daughter could die. Like this could go wrong in a way that she's not able to control. She might not be able to get in there at the last moment just in time to save the people that need to be saved. But she does because she's really that fucking good, right? Like, she manages it. It works out for her, but it is a risk, right? She puts her daughter at risk even to do that. Like, who knows whether, like, Rennie's man would be able to control his trigger finger when he was pointing a gun at her. The other thing that happens, right? Caitlyn shows up with a new character design, more militaristic, tells Sallow to shut the fuck up, takes power, takes control, takes authority, and then Ambessa goes... Like, you can literally see her look at Caitlyn, look at Sallow, and she's like, I have a better option now, right? I have that there. I want that in my corner rather than that little pathetic worm, right? That little liar, that little sort of like easily manipulated weakling. I want this, right? Like, this is what I want in my side. And that's a calculated risk again, because Caitlyn is someone who's strong enough to be able to resist Ambessa. But the calculated risk she's taking is that, well, that's still better, right? Like, it's still better to have someone who's that capable with me. We'll have enough common interests that I can, like, push this to my advantage. But it is a risk. Here's another calculated risk. Ambessa knows that Amara is Black Rose. She knows. She's ready for this. This is all planned. We can see that because her man is sitting there adjusting the little defensive runes on his weapon, the thing that counters the Black Rose magic. They're ready for her. They know that that's going to happen, but it's a calculated risk, so we're pretending. We're pretending not to know why she's here. We're pretending not to know what's going to happen because we want her to overstep her boundaries, right? Like, we want her to get overconfident and say something, give me some information I'm not supposed to have, right? And Amara obligingly does. She does say a little bit too much, confirms Ambessa's suspicions, and... yoink. Here's another calculated risk she takes, by the way. This guy here, I keep forgetting his name, but he suggests maybe we should get Mel involved. Like, Sallow isn't ready, he's not strong enough to be our ally. Rictus, yes. We should get Mel involved, and she's like, nope, that's too dangerous. My daughter is safer if she's our enemy. Don't bring her into this, right? And of course, the consequence of that is that Mel gets brought into this rather forcefully. Like, that's a calculated risk that does not pay off. Then there's the... Okay, remember how we talked about how plays... and, like, stagecraft and stuff is in evidence in the imagery in this season? Yeah, no, the scene with Mel and Lest behind the scenes at the theater, we've seen this before, right? Season 1 used theater imagery as well. Like, there was the whole thing with Jayce at the theater with the performance that was sort of like Mel inviting him backstage to see how the sausage is made, right? Like, to see how Piltovers truly run and inducting him into all this skullduggery. Here... we're doing it again. Like, we're doing again this thing about backstage, being at a theater, masks, plays, and things like that. It's present in the imagery here and there throughout the show. Interestingly, that's a Jarvan play. This is the crowning of one of the kings' Jarvan. One of them, anyway. It wouldn't be Jarvan the Fourth, because, like, why would they put on a play about a king who's currently on the throne in a foreign city? So this will be a play from... this will be something from Legend, right? Like, the crowning of Jarvan the First, maybe. Something along those lines. But it's interesting that that's what they're putting on, is specifically Jarvan complete with spear, and not as hideous as it is in-game, but still an ugly-ass crown, with dragon motifs on it. Huh, interesting. Anyway, backstage, skullduggery, secrets, things being hidden, right? And I don't know, I don't have a great analysis of the scene. I just wanted to hang out with Lest for a bit. Her animation is really fucking good, especially the way she reacts to Mel. Like, there is something here, though. Mel in this whole scene is not appealing to greed. She's not appealing to, I'll pay you a lot of money. She's not threatening Lest that, like, if you don't do this, I'll expose your secrets. None of that. Like, the pressure that Mel has here, the only pressure she even attempts is, if you don't help me, terrible things will happen. The Undercity will get crushed, right? Like, if my mother gains power, the city is fucked, right? And Lest is not particularly inclined to risk herself, right? She's a very worried person, it seems, in her animation. Like, she's a very sort of, like, cautious character. But as Mel talks to her, you can see that, like, when she processes, like, Mel's pleading, that it has an emotional process in her that touches her, that Mel is talking about the common good and talking about, like, the city is in peril. If you don't help, you're the only one who can, like, stand between my mother and power. That seems to be getting to Lest. And the thing about that is there's two ways to read that, right? Either it's because she genuinely is affected by what Mel is saying, right? Either she's genuinely affected and is like, shit, okay, fine, I'll take a risk for this. The other thing is that she's afraid of the consequences. The other interpretation is that what Lest is doing here is trying to protect Mel. That Lest is like, I didn't get anything, I have no information, I can't give you any tools to use in your little political play. For the same reason that Ambessa is doing it. Try to keep Mel out of the, like, sphere of interest of the Black Rose, right? So long as Mel is powerless, maybe the Black Rose doesn't want to do anything to her, but if I give her this thing, if I help her, if I make her a power player, they might come for her. That's the other way to read it. I don't know. The thing about Lest is that she looks suspiciously to me like a Black Rose operative in Legends of Runeterra. Like, she has a similar aesthetic. There's similar colors, there's, like, similar shape language going on. And the Black Rose, as we see with Amara, does not operate on consent, right? Like, if you're marked by the Black Rose, LeBlanc can just kind of possess you, apparently. She can just kind of do it. Doesn't really matter what you want. So if Lest is in the Black Rose and, like, likes Mel and wants to protect her, you can read this scene as her, like, I don't want to give you anything, I'm walking, I'm leaving, I'm not being part of this. Mel convincing her by appealing to her better nature and her being like, oh, fuck, goddammit, okay, fine, I'll help you, but, like, I'm not happy about it. It's a way to interpret it. I don't know. We don't even know if Lest is going to come back or if she's, like, a one-time character. She's too fucking cool to be a one-time character. Like, come on. This character design, you can't use that character design only one time. Come on. But there are ways to read it that sort of imply different things about the scene that's happening here. Also, when Lest says that Ambessa was scared, you can see that that frightens Mel, right? Like, that shocks her. She's like, my mother was frightened. What the hell? She's never scared of anything. What's going on, right? Which, again, is, like, part of the relationship there. Like, Mel is not used to the idea of her mother on the back foot or frightened of anything. Also, Lest is Batman. I like that a lot. Again, that kind of makes me feel like, oh, maybe there's some Black Rose nonsense going on with her. Because, like, if she can fucking Batman like that, that's spycraft, that's ninja shit. That's not shit you can do if you're not something special, right? She's a cat. I mean, I guess that's also an explanation. Cats can vanish and disappear and show up in places they're not supposed to be. I know this from my own life. God, do I know it. One of the little motherfuckers nearly got outside yesterday. Got out of my... I did not know he was in my office until I heard, like, scrabble, 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 and looked over and his ass was halfway out of my fucking window. Anyway. It was Hermes. It was Hermes, that little shit. He snuck in through my door when I wasn't looking, and then, yeah. So, these scenes with Mel, right? Like, this is Mel trying to regain some control over what's happening with the only tools that she's ever really used, like her tools of power, which is information, knowledge, knowing things that other people would rather that she didn't know, right? So she has all this conspiracy board nonsense going on, but she's also, like, out of her depth, right? Like, you can see it on her that she's like, I don't know what's happening, I don't fully understand what's going on. She's relying a lot on Elora to help her get the information that she needs. And Elora became a really interesting character here, like, because clearly LeBlanc has enough of a connection to Elora that she can possess her, but also Elora seems to like Mel quite a lot, actually, to genuinely be loyal to her mistress. But yeah, I'm curious about that. Again, the implication here being that the show is going to dive a lot deeper into Mel's history, right? Like, the implication of this scene to me is, okay, we're going to learn something about who these fucking people are and why things happened the way they did with Ambessa, right? That we'll maybe get another flashback where we actually get to meet Mel's brother and see what happened to her, happened to him and stuff like that. I hope so, anyway. She's going to go off, right? Like, she's like, I have this thing. I can get Sallow out of power with this. Like, I can demonstrate that he's been using Shimmer, which is a banned substance that we've all been trying to destroy. He's been using it recreationally on himself because he's a hypocrite. Cool, I can go and do something. I can be a power player. And that's when... And Mel doesn't know what's happening here, right? Like, her animation makes that abundantly clear. She has not seen this before. She has no idea what the Black Rose is. She's not been involved with this. And poor Elora, like, poor girl, like, she doesn't want this either. This is not with her consent. She's trying to warn Mel, that's why she says Black Rose, right? She's trying to tell Mel who's doing this, give her some kind of a warning as a last act, probably. I mean, I hope Elora isn't dead, but... that shit is in her nostrils, man. It's in her tear ducts. Ugh. I like the horror imagery of it, though. Like, I really like the horror imagery of LeBlanc's power here. Like, fucking hell. All of a sudden, LeBlanc can turn into a mirror image of you. Ooh, how scary. No, it's scary now. Now it's fucking scary. Petals, again. So that's Mel's arc, right? Like, mostly disempowerment, right? Like, trying desperately to wrest back some sense of control, trying to find some knowledge that will allow her to understand what's happening and act against it. Ambessa's thing is much more about gathering allies to her position that will allow her to do what she needs to do, right? This scene is terrifying. Like, this scene is genuinely kind of fucking scary, in a way that the horror imagery really isn't, but, like, just the ease with which she fucking turns these people into chest-pounding military freaks with one charismatic performance, right? Oof. Grim shit. But it's also like you get a sense of how Ambessa has managed to stay in power over things, right? Like, how does Ambessa retain command? How does she, like build her forces, build her houses? Like this. She knows how to push people's levers. She knows how to get people on her side, interested in her, like, ideas. And there's the calculated risk, right? Sallow, no, I'm about to be named general. I'm about to control Piltover. There's that little flicker of the eye. Caitlyn Kiraman. A calculated risk. And we get all the fucking flashbacks here were so good. I'd already figured out that it had to be Ambessa because the show isn't subtle about it. But the flashbacks here, while she's pounding her chest... like that determined look in her eyes as she thinks back on everything she's done to get this far. Fucking cinema, man. This cross-cut, too, I thought was interesting, like, cause it's literally Ambessa sees herself in Caitlyn to an extent, right? Like, it's literally they see something in one another where they believe, right? Like, Ambessa believes she's taking the risk that she and Caitlyn have similar interests, right? Your mother will have justice. I swear it, right? I want to avenge my family. You want to avenge your family. Why don't we be military dictators together? The way she watches Caitlyn's hand, too, right? Like a hungry lion. Waiting for that. Like, ooh. Like, knowing that her gamble paid off, right? She's, like, that's what makes Ambessa a fucking compelling character. That, like, she has that drive, that willingness to take risks, to lose, if that's what it takes, right? To give up power to Caitlyn, rather than having Sallow dancing on the end of a string, because having Caitlyn as a partner is more advantageous. Like, what a fucking, oh, what a good villain. What a good bad guy. What a good anti-villain, too. If she turns out, like, to like, sacrifice herself for Mel at the end. It's like, Nom 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 nom. Very good. I am eating well. Again, my assumption is that Ambessa is going to die. My assumption is that she's going to have the opportunity to sacrifice herself for Mel, and she's going to take it. Because family is the thing that matters. My assumption is that Mel is going to become her mother by the end of season 2, right? She's going to step into the role of matriarch of the Medarda house, right? Whatever that means for her position in Piltover, whatever that means for her relationships, that's my assumption, is that, like, the lioness is going to get succeeded by one of her cubs, as it were. And all of this is set up for Ambessa to make that sacrifice, that calculated risk, right? Now, let's talk about Jinx. Jinx, Sevika, and Isha, more specifically, but we'll start with Jinx, because here's a very important scene that I want you to remember. Jinx begins this season with a funeral for a parent. That's the first thing we see her do, is bury a parent and suffer as she's burying him, feeling responsible for his death, which, you know, she has good reason to, but feeling very, very responsible for his death, for the deaths of everyone she's ever loved, and struggling to let go of him even though she knows she has to, right? And there's a mirroring here that's happening with the baptism scene, right? Like, which the scene itself makes explicit, putting him in the water in the way that he put her in the water. Like, mirrorings, parallels, Arcane loves this shit. But she does let go of him, even though she doesn't want to, even though she has this reaching out to try and grab him, right? She does let go of him, and she lets him vanish from her life, and I mean, it hurts her. It drives her to some really extreme, fucked up behaviors. It drives her to do things that hurt other people recklessly and irresponsibly, and indeed things that hurt herself. Because Jinx is going to spend most of the first act trying to die. That's certainly my reading of the character, is that everything she's attempting to do in the first act is in part to punish Vi for abandoning her. Like, it's lashing out, it's punishing Vi, but she also just wants it to end. Like, she's kind of a dead woman walking, right? Like, she kind of assumes that something's gonna kill her eventually, and she's frustrated that nothing has stopped her yet, right? And that's the contradiction of Jinx, right? This contradiction of, on the one hand, she hates herself, she doesn't want to do anything or hurt anyone. On the other hand, she's being pushed by something. And the Sucker music video, I think, is particularly instructive about Jinx and how she's feeling as we open the season. Because we get this flashback of Silco sitting in his chair bit, presiding over the Chem Barons of Zaun. And then we go through, right, like, Finn dies, Silco dies, and everyone freaks out. Rena dies, and then all bets are off, right? Like, now it's fucking hell on earth, right? And the song lays out that in the aftermath of Silco's death, everyone's fighting over his legacy, right? Like, everyone's fighting over power, everyone's fighting over control. They want the throne, they want the money, they want the power. And Jinx is walking away from all of that. Quite literally, just walking away from it, ignoring it. She doesn't want any part of it. She doesn't want to be in it. She doesn't care about Silco's legacy. She doesn't care about Zaun. She doesn't care about much of anything, really. Like, she's just so tired, right? She's so exhausted and done with everything. And all she's got in her head is, like, that memory of laying him in the river. But all the power, all the politicking, all the nonsense doesn't matter to her. It doesn't touch her, right? She doesn't care. This is not part of her world anymore. Hence the lyrics of the song. You're gone, sucker. Get the hell out of my head. Because, like, it's a reflection of Jinx rejecting Silco's legacy. Rejecting his plans and his, like, all that shit. She doesn't care about it anymore. It doesn't matter to her, right? And then we get Isha, which is her name, who was in the music video we got just before the season launched. This wide-eyed, sort of innocent street kid, question mark? And I say question mark because, well, look at that vest there. Like, that's some fine embroidery, actually. That looks pretty expensive. So where did she get that if she's someone who just lives in the sewer pipes? Why is she dressed in, like, reasonably nice clothes, actually? She's still clearly feral. Like, the kid's got moxie, right? Yeah, she's Teemo. She has a Teemo hat on, also, which is hilarious. Because, yeah, that's very much a Teemo-coded thing to do. But who the hell is she? Why is she down here? And what is she going to have to do with Jinx in particular? Because what happens is, well, Isha just kind of falls into Jinx's lap. Quite literally just, like, falls out of the sky. That's how they meet, right? Like, so it's a complete weird coincidence that it happens. The thing about Isha, though, is that she's being chased by, like, 3 goons who are clearly from the Chem Baron who looks like them. It's his crew, 1, 2, and 9. Like, it's his crew. Cross, yes. From his crew. And it's not just casual that they're chasing her, right? Like, these guys are going to significant trouble to get after this child. So there's something more going on with Isha. She's not just a street kid. She matters somehow. She's someone's child. She has some connection to something. They need her for blackmail. I don't know. It's not clear. But clearly, this isn't just a random street rat. This is a child who has connections that matter, right? And these dudes are clearly willing and able to do quite severe violence both to her and to anyone who protects her in order to get a hold of her. Isha's colors are also interesting because she has yellow in her color scheme as opposed to Jinx's blue, which is like strong contrast there. Which again, I'm curious about the affinity or the difference that indicates between them. Because we know from trailers that Isha will eventually have blue hair and be like a disciple of Jinx and a follower of her as she's leading the Zaun revolution. She's going to be carried away from the bridge by Sevika at some point while holding out a hand and yelling, presumably for Jinx. The trouble with Isha as a character so far is that she doesn't have any character so far. That's really the main thing. Isha is someone, she runs away from things, she's wide-eyed and she stares at them, and she's fixated on Jinx. Beyond that, she's not really much of anything. She's kind of, in the first act at least, this could change. I expect it to change in Act 2 and 3. But in the first act, she's mostly just kind of a prop. She's just kind of a complication. This picture and embodiment of innocence and of the vulnerable people of Zaun who need to be protected from the violence of Zaun that falls into Jinx's lap, seemingly as a means to kickstart her character arc when she begins to care about something again, right? It's all very... like, the whole thing about, like, I was so down and out and I didn't care about anything. Oh no, I have a child now. I care about life again. It's a trope thing that can be played very poorly and kind of shitty. Like this thing about, like, if you want to learn to care about the world, you have to become a parent of some kind, which is like, a little bit. There is parallels, though, because there always is with Arcane, right? There's a parallel in that, like, Silco also changed because he got himself a daughter, right? Like, a daughter changed Silco substantially, and so Jinx meeting a child, learning to care about her, is there anything so undoing, right? Like, for this to become the center of her world, it would parallel the character arc of Silco. It would have some parallels with the character of Vander, who also, like, gives up on his violent revolution when he has to take care of these 2 children and sees the consequences of what he's done. It would parallel some things. I don't know enough about how this is going to play out to have a judgment on it, right? Like, this is not a negative review as such, just to say that where it starts is a kind of trope and a kind of stereotype that I'm not particularly fond of on the face of it. What matters is how they're going to make her more of a character going forward, but here, she really is just... she meets Jinx. Jinx kills 3 people, points a gun at her, and then she's like, I am fixated on you now, and you are my best friend, and I will die to save your life, right? That's sort of... there's not much character there, right, to work with. This is the barest sketch of someone. It's a prop. She needs to be built out so we understand why she would react that way to someone murdering 3 people in front of her and then pointing a gun at her head, right? That can be done later. For now, she's very thinly sketched. And I'm like, you need to play this right, Arcane, otherwise this is going to be an eye-rolling cliche in my eyes. But whatever. That's Isha. Sevika. Sevika has a very different relationship to Silco's legacy, right? Like, Sevika cares about Silco's legacy. She wants to hold it together. She wants to achieve his dream, because his dream was also her dream. That was something they shared deeply. And she's having some trouble to do that, because the other Kim Barons are like, well, fuck that. Let's fucking fight over resources, because we are capitalists, and we are assholes, and we suck, right? So Sevika is here trying to hold the Kim Barons together with both hands, having a little bit of trouble with it because she doesn't have both hands right now. Right? That's sort of the... And again, that's the arm here being used as synecdoche, right? That Sevika has lost a part of herself. A very important part of herself. Like, the part of herself that allowed her to do violence in the world. Like, the arm was something Silco gave her, right? This is a gift from Silco, a compensation for, like, the fact that she lost her arm protecting him in Act 1 of Season 1. And now she doesn't have it, she doesn't have him anymore, and she can't fix it on her own, right? Probably also because she's pretty drunk here, is the implication. Like, maybe not the best frame of mind in which to be trying to fix complicated mechanics, because she was perfectly capable of adjusting and fixing it herself in Act 1, right? But here, it's like, the storytelling is she has lost a pretty important part of herself, her stability, her ability to act, right? Like, her confidence, her certainty in the vision, right? Her ability to be a person in the world. And that's gonna come through when Jinx gives her a new arm, literally, right? Like, gives her that capacity back, gives her something to believe in, gives her a source of strength once again. Jinx and Sevika are sisters, I should say. Adoptive sisters, as it were, but Sevika is very much combination daughter and sister to Silco, right? Like, it's they have again, maybe not sisters, but they have family, right? Like, they are adoptive family. They hate each other a little bit. They have been in conflict with one another a lot, especially over Silco. But now that he's gone, they are the only people they can talk to share that grief. Like, they only really have each other left out of this family, out of this found family unit. And that's what they bond over, right? And the interesting part of this, so in Season 1, the scenes with Jinx, the medical device, and Silco's eye, right? The first time we see it, it's this kind of disconcerting, like, oh, why she's in his lap? Oh no, kind of thing where you kind of go, oh, what's going on here? You kind of freak out a little bit until you realize what it is. Where it's after something bad has happened to Jinx, she comes to Silco, sits in his lap, she helps him with the medicine, they share vulnerability, right? And that's a way for them as father and daughter to share vulnerability, to both be vulnerable with each other, and to support each other, reconfirm each other, emotionally support each other, right? The second time it happens, something bad has happened to Jinx, she's really fucking mad, and she comes and, like, she stabs Silco multiple times with this thing as a way to punish him for betraying her. But she's also there seeking comfort from him. That's the other thing she's doing there. She's like attacking him, she's hurting him, but she also really just badly wants to feel good again, wants to feel comfortable again. She's looking for comfort from him, and he offers that to her. He gives her that reassurance, right? That he loves her, that he cares about her, that she hasn't fucked everything up. She's not about to be betrayed and cast aside. I care about you. So for Jinx, right, like, this is a moment and a behavior that's like, I'm looking for some kind of reassurance, right? I'm looking for some kind of comfort. And she finds it here with Sevika, right? Rule of threes, as it were. Because Sevika is family at this point. And it's just a really beautifully shot scene. I shouldn't just go through it and play it like this, because I'm gonna get copyright struck all to hell. But the denouement of it is, Sevika's like, what the hell do we do now? Jinx picks up her arm and is like, watch it all burn. Because that's all she really has left, right? Is like, everything's going to hell. I'm gonna die anyway. Watch it all burn. And that's very much the Jinx persona saying that as well, right? It's like, yeah, it's just fucking hell in the handbasket. Everyone's gonna die. Everything's gonna go to shit. Might as well just watch it burn, right? That is something that comes back in the... Let's skip ahead a little bit here. When Sevika rescues Jinx from Smeech... What a fucking scene this is, by the way. When she does that, and they have this little moment together, right? Where Jinx is like, you could have just let me eat it. Right? You could have just let me die. Why didn't you let me die? And Sevika throws this thing back at her like, haven't I done you enough favors, right? Like this little sisterly family inside joke thing, callback reference. Why did you fix my arm? It was something I could fix, right? And that's the thing about Jinx, right? Like that contradiction between I'm a force of destruction, all I can do is break things, all I can do is kill people, I am good for nothing except like pain and suffering and but also my sister used to tell me I could fix anything, right? She wants to fix things. She wants to so badly. That's what she's trying to do when she lets the monkey with the hex crystal out. When they're right about, like, she just wants to fix things. She just wants to help. She just wants to save people. So, like, for Jinx, like, this little parting gift for Sevika is, like, it's a very characteristic thing, right? Of Powder specifically. That's the Powder personality poking its head out a little bit and saying, hey, I'm still in here, right? Which is, we're going to talk about that when we get to Vi, but, like, even though at the end of Act 1, Powder should be gone, right, for good. Jinx thinks Powder is gone for good. Everyone thinks Powder is gone for good. There's still little bits. Like, you can't just make her go away. Vi very badly needs Powder to be gone, because otherwise she can't, you know, try and kill Jinx. But Powder's still in there. Just a little bit of Powder is still in there. And it's also, as other people have pointed out, it's also well observed that, like, Jinx gave Sevika an arm that's all about gambling because Sevika is a gambler. We've seen her gamble multiple times. Again, family, right? Like, Jinx knows her. They're not just enemies. They're not just casual acquaintances. These people are family, right? They have a relationship that's deeper than just, you know, we're crime people who hate each other in a crime family thing. I'm still curious why Sevika goes along with what Jinx is trying to do there, though. Like, because what Jinx is saying is, like, I'm going to take care of what's left of my family, right? She's saying, I'm going to try and kill Vi, right? I'm going to bait Vi down here. I'm going to try and kill her and then do some stuff, blow up some pipelines, like, make some stuff happen. And, like, is Sevika agreeing to help with that just because it is a strike against Topside? I guess. As a favor, maybe? I guess. Again, Act 2 might give us some more insight into what Sevika's motivation is. It could just be that Sevika, like, cares about Jinx and wants to help her. It could just be that. But Act 1 doesn't make it quite clear what her motivation is beyond just an opportunity to do violence to Topsiders, right? Anyway, stepping back, Jinx's relationship with Vi here. The fact that Vi and the squad are using the Grey, like the poison air, as a bioweapon here is, like, grim. And, hey, remember the very first act of Season 1? The very first act, the very first episode, the very first shot, where it's an enforcer sort of stepping out of this smoke cloud, and then, like, Jinx's hallucinations of, like, an evil face over the top of it. Do you remember that? Do you remember how that's the very first shot of the very first season, of the very first episode, of the very first bit of the show? Yeah, just a little bit, from Jinx's perspective, what a fucking thing to see her sister like that. That's a painful experience, and you can see that on her. And as Vi picks up, I guess, Clagor's glasses that Jinx has fixed, she has the shot. Vi isn't moving. Vi doesn't know. She has the shot. She's a Jinx. She just destroys her family. She destroys everything she cares about. She's a Jinx. But there's Powder, who still loves her sister, and who could not pull the trigger even if she wanted to. And so this scene of Jinx, like, running, she's swapping between Powder and Jinx so much here, in terms of her acting, in terms of, like, what the rig is doing. Like, anger, betrayal, hurt, pain, suffering, fear. And it's grim, man. Like, what a fucking thing. And that's something to keep in mind, is, like, Jinx feels deeply, 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 deeply betrayed by Vi, right? In Season 1, at the end of Season 1, Jinx wasn't even gonna try and kill Caitlyn and Vi. Well, she might have killed Caitlyn, but not Vi. She wasn't interested in killing Vi as such. She nearly did, but that's not what it was about. Like, it was still about, like, what she wanted Vi was to be her sister again, right? to find some way to resolve the contradiction and to make her feel safe, give her some sense of safety and identity again, right? That's what she was looking for, just as she's looking for it from Silco, right? In this season, it's this betrayal. She's gonna punish Vi for that. She's gonna punish Vi for that really badly. Also, this scene, the way she catches herself here, and then the Jinx personality comes out. You see that fucking shift from, like, I'm coughing, I'm caught off guard, to I'm gonna ruin that man's entire mental game. Pushing her eye closer to the needle on purpose? Jesus! You're the kind of guy who likes to get in close. Intimidation? Nat 20. Holy shit. I loved this scene. I just like this scene a lot. God, the animation breakdown of that one's gonna take a second to finish. Anyway, they try to build the connection between Jinx and Isha, right? Like that Isha throws the little sort of fireworks bomb that distracts the guy long enough for Jinx to shoot him. They have this little scene together when Sevika is tearing Smeech apart. And I think the idea here is that Isha kind of matches Jinx's freak, right? And that's okay. Like they're trying to build a dynamic between them, a relationship, right? Where like still Jinx has this thing of like, what are you doing touching me, kid? Like, so like not quite accepting, but not really pushing away either. Enjoying the show together kind of vibe. Yeah, Isha looks like Powder a lot. Like, that's something that seems to be intentional with her character design, is that there's a bunch of Powder. Like, she has the tooth gap, she has the big eyes. Like, there's some visual similarities because Jinx is going to see something of herself in Isha, and that's going to prompt her to have a character arc where she learns to care about Zon, kind of thing. Again, Isha needs to be more of a character, ultimately, than just this little silent sort of like... Well, it's not even that she's silent. That's not really the problem. The problem is that she doesn't really seem to demonstrate any wants or desires or interiority beyond just being next to Jinx and reacting to whatever thing is happening. Again, the rest of the season will probably do a lot to build that out. Anyway, Jinx is punishing Vi. That's what this whole thing is about. Like, that's why she set up this huge cathedral with scenes from their life. Like, with, like, pictures of Vander, their childhood together, the two of them as, like, loving siblings. It's punishment. It's taunting. It's, you know, it's understandable, right? Like, it's... You turned blue, right? Like, you fucking went with the fucking enforcers after everything that happened to us. And Vi, for her part, is trying so hard to push back and be like, you're not Powder. You're not my sister. This isn't you. I won't take responsibility for your mistakes anymore. And she seems really confident in it too. Like, she seems like she's really definitely determined to believe that at all costs. For sure. And we'll talk about this more once we get to Caitlyn and Vi as characters. When Vi tears the minigun apart, again... Hello, Powder. She's still in there. And she's genuinely quite shocked by it, right? Like, she's genuinely quite shocked that Vi would be determined enough to really do that kind of violence. And that's the contradiction that's constantly present in the fight between Jinx and Vi is... I mean, Vi, for one thing, is like, yeah, your heart is really in this. Boy, howdy, you definitely want to be here. You definitely want to be doing this, for sure. And for Jinx, it's just lashing out, right? It's just wanting to work out all of this pain and all of this fear and all of this anger. And Arcane, once again, not a subtle show. Do you get it? Are you sure you get it? Do you get it? Is it clear to you what's happening here? This is not a criticism. I love that. I love that it's a show that, like, wears its heart on its sleeve like that. Just, it's funny when it's that obvious. Anyway, once she has lost, right? When Vi is there ready to deal the death blow, that made me jump in my seat the first time I saw it. Because that's the thing that made it clear to me what she was doing, right? Go on, do it! I'm ready. She relaxes. Like it's a relief, right? Like, finally, right? Like all she has wanted was just for something to be over, right? I'm glad it's you. And poor Vi, you can see her go through the thing of like, she's in anger. She's like, powder? And they're like, no, it can't be powder. No, can't be powder. If it's powder, I can't do this. So it has to be Jinx, right? Like, look at her, like, just like waiting for the end. And you can see that Vi kind of has to go. She's lying again. It's not her. And if not for Isha interrupting, I think Vi would probably have done it. But then Isha points a gun at Jinx's sister, and Jinx goes, no! Because at the end of all of it, she still doesn't want Vi to get hurt. In spite of everything, all the betrayals, all of it, she still doesn't want Vi to be hurt. Which is where my interpretation of this scene comes in. I think in part of this is about punishing Vi. It's about, like, you betrayed me, you betrayed everyone, fuck you, I'm gonna hurt you, I'm gonna hurt you, I'm gonna hurt you. But I think she's also trying to set Vi free. I think some part of this is also, I'm gonna go away now, right? Like, you kill me, it's over, you can move on with your life, right? I think, yeah, I'm not gonna burden you anymore. I think that's part of what Jinx is doing here, is trying to free her sister from herself, right? You kill me, you're gonna be a hero to the Topsiders, you can move on with your life, you can move on, you can forget me, right? And it's... yeah. Like, Jinx has that line with Smeech, right? Like, no matter what I do, I just can't seem to die, right? And that's the Jinx thing. That's that contradiction, right? Like, where she wants two things at the same time that cannot be reconciled, right? And that leads to all of this chaos and all of this pain and all of this hurt. But at the end of it, I really think all she wanted was to die and have it be over and set Vi free of her, right? And Isha is the complicating factor there, right? This is something we talked about in my animation breakdown of Season 1. A self-sacrifice, like, Viktor has this idea that I can sacrifice myself and that has no consequences, right? He's proven wrong because Skye goes with him. It's the same thing here. Like suicide isn't just a self-sacrifice, right? Other people get hurt by it too. Isha seems to be the factor that's introduced here to be like, no, Jinx, you can't actually just kill yourself. If you kill yourself, you're not gonna be, like, someone will miss you, right? It will matter. It will impact other people. You can't just die for people. You have to live for them. Like, that seems to be what the show is pointing towards. And this is all powder, right? Like, there's a kid here. She's pointing a gun at my sister. It's like, Jesus, no. Like, this, all of this is not how things were supposed to go, right? The finger just hovering on the trigger like that, Jesus. Anyway, Caitlyn takes a very justified shot, right? Like, there's a gun pointed at a person. Disarm, protect Vi. That's fine. We'll get to that. And then here, Jinx is like, no, get away from me, kid. Like, Jesus Christ, you're gonna die if you, like... Here's another fucking complication. Someone else who's gonna get hurt because of me. That's certainly my reading of this here, is like, get away from here before you get hurt because of me. And Vi sees that. She sees Jinx care about the safety of this other kid. And Vi knows now, oh shit, Powder's still in there. because that's what, like, I don't think it's necessarily just powder, but, like, that's something my sister would do. And now Vi is in a tough spot, right? Because now, well, again, we'll talk about the whole thing with Caitlyn later. But Vi prevents Caitlyn from taking the shot, and then Jinx sees that. My sister protected me. And that gets to her too, right? It's like, wait, what do you mean she protected me? Why would she do that? Why is she still trying to protect me, right? And then Sevika turns on the wind trap, and Jinx goes, no, it wasn't supposed to happen like this, because she wanted to just die here and have it be over. And then things roll on. But, like, she sees her sister protecting her, saving her again. And it's like, oh no, I couldn't set her free, right? Oh, like I said, you can't just not be family anymore. Fucking hell. I don't know how things are gonna end. Like, from what I've seen of the trailers, my assumption is Jinx is gonna survive this. Sevika is gonna take her and be like, listen, you have a responsibility now. Like, there's more to this than just you. You mean something to the people of this city. You can make the world better. There's something here you can actually fix, Jinx, right? Like, and Jinx is gonna have to learn to step into that role, right? Like, of someone who actually gives a shit about the people of the underground. And in so doing, she's going to take up not just the position of Silco, right, as leader of the underground. I think she's gonna take up the position of Vander, specifically. Like, certainly that's what the poster we saw in one of the trailers, where, like, Vander was specifically above Jinx as, like, a symbol that the Undercity is invoking. I think Jinx is gonna have to become the new Vander, rather than the new Silco. Right? Which, like, oh, cool. Because that raises some questions about Vi, who used to be Vander's, like, inheritor, right? Interesting. I'm curious about that. But my assumption is by the end of it, Jinx is gonna, like, it's gonna be everyone teams up to fight Noxus, and especially to fight the Black Rose, right? Like, I think Ambessa is probably gonna be the big bad villain at the end, where, like, there's a big pitch battle and everyone has to fight, like, do all that shit. But I think it's gonna end with the forces of Piltover having to ally with the forces of Zaun to both fight off a greater outside enemy, and Jinx is gonna be the revolutionary leader there, who's, like, leading the forces of Zaun in that particular instance. That's where I think it's gonna go, eventually. How is her relationship with Vi gonna end up? That I am not so sure about. Because Vi will definitely be fighting in the final battle, we know this. But, like, Vi is also gonna go down a deep, dark rabbit hole. We know that Jinx is gonna be there seeing Vi spiral, right? We know that Jinx is gonna be aware of Vi, even if Vi isn't aware of her. I can't help but wonder if Jinx is maybe the person who ends up pulling Vi out of the downward spiral. I don't think Caitlyn's gonna do it. I think Vi is gonna get to rock bottom, and I think it might be Jinx who pulls her up from that. I think my hope is that Season 2 is about a reconciliation for the sisters. My hope is that. I feel that's where it's pointing towards. Again, because Jinx is going to have to step into Vander's place, right? And Vander is the one who used to pull Vi up when she was really fucking down low. So, yeah, they'll fight Warwick together. Like, that would be the assumption, is, like, they'll both sort of have to deal with him in that sense, right? So that's my assumption. I don't know if that's going to be proven true. It's not a prediction, just thought about where Jinx is going to end up going. So, let's talk about Caitlyn Kiraman. Caitlyn opens this storyline with a funeral. The worst thing in the world that could possibly happen to her has happened. Her mother is dead. She could have done something to prevent it. And now she has to put her in the ground. And not only does she have to put her in the ground, she has to step into her place. And multiple times during... So, as I've heard it, this scene was animated partly with actual fucking charcoal. Like, a lot of these background things and things are actually charcoal drawings that were, like, made dozens and dozens and dozens of them, over which they composited and animated a bunch of 3D animation on top of that, which, like, fucking hell, Fortiche, you were already flexing. You were already flexing. You didn't need to flex harder. Everyone was like, hey, Fortiche, they're pretty... You didn't need to. You were fine. You had... Okay, sure. Whether... I mean, maybe that's misinformation from someone on Twitter. I don't know. I haven't double-checked it. Don't fucking quote me on it. Whether it's actual charcoal or not, it's fucking gorgeous. It's an amazing fucking scene, this. And we're going to stick with this one for a little bit. Not a full animation breakdown, but we're going to stick with it. Because Caitlyn's facial animation, the journey that she goes through emotionally here as she's dealing with her mother being gone it's a hell of a thing. Especially once the casket starts to close, when she finally has to say goodbye and never see her again. Don't go. Don't go. Right? That you see the impulse in her to reach out to, like, please don't go away, trying to see her for just a little bit longer. Right? To hold on to just not yet. And then to stand there as the head of the household, right? Her father is gone, right? Like, her father is not, he's not in control of the Kiraman household right now. He's not in control of anything. She was the rock, right? Like, she was the head of the household. She was the one who held everything together. And there's Caitlyn standing in her place. Alone. That's the other, this cut here, right? Like, alone. So Caitlyn starts in a tough spot, you might say. Not in a particularly good place. I want you to remember, though, that Jinx starts this season in exactly the same place. Having buried a parent that she was partly responsible for killing. And having to deal with, like, stepping into his place in Zaun rather than in Piltover, right? Jinx starts exactly the same place. Arcane Season 1 was already drawing a bunch of parallels between Jinx and Caitlyn. There's a video essay about that online somewhere from a small channel. I saw it the other day. I can't remember the name. If I remember it, I'll put it in the description. It's pretty good. You should go watch it. But it was like, as we said, Arcane is a show all about parallels and, like, mirrors and things that reflect each other and stuff like that. Caitlyn and Jinx have some reflections already. They very explicitly start Act 1 of Season 2 in exactly the same place, burying a parent who they feel responsible for killing. Right? Remember that there is this connection, this parallel between them. But yeah, there's a gaping hole in the world where her mother used to be, and Caitlyn is struggling tremendously to try and find some way to fill it, right? Again, this is her mother's council chair. She's literally in her mother's place, right? Not subtle, this show, Arcane. And her dad... I mean, yeah, fella, I felt like that after a couple of bereavements, so I get where he is. But the conversation she has here is... You can see she's gathering courage for it, right? I had the shot. I had the shot. She could have killed Jinx. She could have pulled the trigger. She could have not been merciful for just 1 second instead of being the good cop, of obeying the rules and, like, trying to take people in and arrest. I could just have pulled the trigger. Could just have killed her, and I could have stopped this. And the guilt of that is consuming her. It's eating her. And she tries to express that to her father, right? To say, it's my fault she's dead. It's my fault, right? Like, I did it. It's like because I wasn't strong enough. It's because I didn't take the shot. And her father, he tries to reassure her, to give her some courage or something, but what he does is he hands her the Kiraman key, her mother's key, like this signifier and symbol of her mother's position in the world, right? Her position in her class position, her political position, her power. What he's trying to do is tell her, like, listen, she was proud of you, she loved you, she would want you to step into this, she would never blame you. That's what he's trying to do. Caitlyn, though, like, because she feels guilt, right? Like, I don't deserve to hold this. I killed her. This is my fault. I'm the one who did this. I'm not worthy of this thing. I cannot hold this, right? But this is being given to her nonetheless. All that power, all that money, those political connections, that privilege, it's yours now, and you must live up to it. Oh, by the way, fuck your girlfriend. Your girlfriend is a piece of shit. Right? Those are the two things her dad communicates to her in this scene. It's like, you must become your mother now in order to honor her memory. And also, that bitch isn't good enough for you. Right? He has understandable anger, again, towards Vi. Vi is connected to the death of his wife. Right? It's not, on a human level, I don't expect this man to be, like, polite to Vi under these circumstances. Of course he's fucked up. Of course he's projecting his anger onto some other things, right? It's not okay. It's not a good thing to do, but it's understandable on a human level. Oh, hey, Vi, look how you're behind prison bars here, almost like you're trapped, like you're feeling constrained and trapped by the situation that you're in. That's funny. Interesting part of the visual imagery. The two of them also begin this season together, right? Emotionally aligned with each other. Vi is probably one of the few people that Caitlyn knows who could possibly understand what she's going through at all and offer her any comfort. And Vi tries, bless her heart. I'm curious about the hands here, though. Like, look at the way Vi's hands are, like, clenched. And eventually they soften up. I think also Vi has a lot of guilt here, right? Because Jinx killed her mom, right? Like, Vi has a lot of guilt that I'm responsible for this somehow. And that guilt is also going to come into play with her. That Vi feels very responsible for the death of Caitlyn's mother. I think that's one of the reasons why things go the way they do. But yeah, Caitlyn is the one who, like, takes the initiative for this intimacy and bridges the gap between them. And then, like, as they're sort of trying to talk through it, this first little move, right? This, my friends, is a loyalty test. And if your partner starts giving you loyalty tests a lot, if that starts to become a thing that they're concerned about, couples therapy is a good place to start. Making a fake identity, faking your death, and moving to another country, also a good option. What I'm saying is that's a red flag for a relationship is if someone starts doing loyalty tests where they need to know that you are with them, right? Like that you will choose them over everything else always. It's not necessarily that it makes anyone evil, it's just a red flag, right? So what Caitlyn's doing here is trying to give Vi something good, right? Like, this is a thing that will allow you to be a part of Piltover society, be a part of my life, and we can go and we can try and find Jinx together, and this will allow us to, like, to just, like, from Caitlyn's perspective, she's offering Vi something helpful, right? Something useful, something good. Like, you can get away from Zaun, that fucking shit place full of garbage people that I hate, and you can be with me instead, right? For Vi, this means something decidedly different, right? This is the badge that killed her parents twice, right? Like, this is the badge that killed her parents on the bridge, and, like, Piltover is kind of, like, the reason why everything fucking happened that led to the death of Vander and the dissolution of her family. She was kidnapped by Marcus at the end of Season 1, Act 1, and taken away from Jinx, and thrown in prison for 8 years, right? So, this doesn't mean that to Vi. This isn't security, this isn't a position in the class hierarchy, this isn't, like, advancement or a chance to be with Caitlyn. This is bad, right? So, this is, like, misaligned communication. Caitlyn does that, I think, 2 reasons. First of all, Caitlyn is in a vulnerable, terrified position right now, right? Where she feels surrounded by enemies and she desperately wants someone on her side, right? She's trying at this stage still to temper her hatred, right? Like, to say, like, I cannot let this blossom into just, I can't just make this about hate. I have to control this. Like, she's still trying to be on the right side. But she's also terrified. And she wants Vi by her side. And when Vi says, I will not put that on and be by your side, for her, that feels like a bit of a betrayal, right? Like, that feels a bit of like... And she literally does that, like, I thought you were on my side. And Vi says, you can't possibly know what this feels like. They killed my parents. And Caitlyn is like, yes, I can know what that feels like. My parent is dead too. And it's like, no, Caitlyn. No, you can't. Those are not the same thing. That's not the same thing. Sweetie, you don't understand that. But it's not the same thing. I'm sorry, honey. I know that's what you're trying to do, but Vi has, like... We'll get to that. We'll get to it. But this is, like, Caitlyn for the first bit of toxic venom that sort of shows up here is like, I thought you were on our side. And the way she says it, like, the animation on it, like... The disdain in that, right? Whew. Grim. Nasty. And Vi walks away for good reason, right? So that's where their relationship starts. And this we get the second part of, like, the foreshadowing for Act 2, I assume. The presence of the bottle, right? That Vi is pretty listless. She doesn't have her sister anymore. Like, she believes that Powder is dead at this point. She's certainly telling herself that. The relationship with Caitlyn is tenuous. And it's tempting to just kind of... You know. But she's not there yet. So she takes the bottle and throws it, right? Like, she's not there yet. We're just teasing that little thing is rearing its ugly head. And then we have Mr. Shield Guy. An enforcer, I believe. He's wearing an enforcer uniform. But his aesthetic and his character design is very Zaun. Isn't it? Loris, yeah. Like, there's something about the roughness, like the hole he's got in his shirt. The sideburns that are a lot like Vander's. Like, his facial hair and his face construction is like very Vander-esque. Same thing with the open white shirt, right? Sort of taking pity on a fellow miserator, but also an enabler. Not maliciously, not cruelly, not for any bad reason, just, you know, she seems like she needs a drink, I'll give her one. And this seems to be sort of the other side, like, yeah, I mean, he's gonna... I don't want to theorize too much about him because he's gonna have his thing in Act 2. Like, Act 2 is gonna be where I think he gets to be more of a character. Act 1, he's just kind of sort of there. Much in the same way that Isha is just kind of a prop to Jinx. I think Loris here is just kind of a prop to Vi's character arc so far. Again, future acts might deal with it a little bit more, expand on him, but for now, this is just sort of foreshadowing that Vi is going to search for solutions at the bottom of a bottle before this is over. Anyway, back to Caitlyn. Look at the expression of her mouth there. The tightness of it. As we transition into... Like, she repeats the action, right? This is what she did over her mother's coffin. Exactly the same thing. And we transition into this mindscape of nothing but the petals of her mother's grave. Like, these things that are associated with her death. And Caitlyn walks through a wasteland of that, right? Like, just nothing but her mother's death everywhere around her, under her feet, flowing through the air. And all she's thinking about, all she can possibly imagine, the only thing that's on her mind is just kill Jinx. And then she comes back to herself, right? The scene she has with Jayce is another one where you can see her trying to hold on to who she is, right? To hold on to her beliefs that, like the people of Zaun, they're just people. We can't hate them. We can't just do hex-tech weapons and invade. Like, she's trying to hold on to it, right? Like, she's trying to hold on to what she believes is true, but she's struggling. And we get this with the wind chimes. The way it speeds up, and her animation becomes more and more heavy and active, and her face distorts. And Jinx. And it's just the hatred. As the wind kicks up, and it gets faster and faster, and you can see that Jayce is like, whoa! Whoa, girl, that's not... You don't talk like that usually. Hang on. Caitlyn, do you need to therapy maybe or something? And Caitlyn goes, no, I'm trying to, like, of course, it's just, you know, I think that's part of the reason why she's kind of, I think it's part of the reason why in this scene she kind of talks poetically, right? Like, I think of my mother and it feels like a stone sinking into dark water. Like, because she's masking, right? She's masking the actual roiling pain and anger that's inside of her behind politeness, right? She's trying to think her way through it. And then she says, I think of Vi, and the wind dies down. Because still, Vi is a stabilizing presence in her life, right? Like, because of Vi, Vi is a big part of the reason why Caitlyn is holding on to her humanity at all. Why she's holding on to, like, no, it's not all the Zonite's fault. It's, like, she's trying to. But she's also struggling, right? This shit is building up in her. Vi, for her part, still hanging out with Loris. And, yeah, no, it's starting a little bit with the alcohol. And then there's Maddie. Sunshine, adorable, cute little sweet girl Maddie. Literally a ray of sunshine, like Mercy in fucking Overwatch. Shows up to be like, Vi? Oh, I recognized you because of the tiny tattoo on your face. That's why. That's the only reason why I knew where to look for you. Hi, I'm Maddie. I've got a Scottish accent. I can't do a Scottish accent. I've got a Scottish accent, and I'm adorable, and I'm optimistic, and I'm going to give you lots of compliments, and I'm going to be super sweet to you, and I'm going to tell you that Caitlyn loves you very much, and was talking you up down at the police station. And boy, it sure would be great if you were to join up with the enforcers, because we need more good ones. Like, wouldn't that... Point is, I'm suspicious of her, right? I'm suspicious. The crack theory I have is that she's Black Rose, right? Like, that this is... like, because Black Rose is everywhere. LeBlanc is everyone. Everything's Black Rose. It's all connected. Right? That's my crack theory, is that she's Black Rose and that she's acting in part to, like, manipulate things on LeBlanc's behalf in that sense, right? The more likely theory, I think, is that, yeah, no, Maddie knew where to find Vi because Caitlyn told them to follow her, right? Maddie knew what to say to Vi because Caitlyn told her what to say, or at least made sure to plant in Maddie a lot of the ideas of what she would need to say to Vi in order to sort of, like, my more thing is, like, these two are cops that are particularly close to Caitlyn. That's why she chose them for her strike team. Like, and Caitlyn told them to keep an eye on her girlfriend, right? I think that's the more likely thing, but, like, Maddie there, girl, you just... all of the suspicions. Like, how did you know where to find her? Loris isn't buying it either, by the way. Like, we see that, right? Like, she's, like, giving this gushing speech about how Vi is so cool, and Loris is pretending to sleep, and he's like, yeah, bullshit. Like, side eye. Bullshit. Like, he's not buying it. He sees that something else is on here, right? So, like, I think Maddie, at the very least, was told to follow Vi by Caitlyn. Because Caitlyn knows that Maddie... sweet, adorable, little innocent, optimistic, idealistic Maddie would be, like, the best person to send to talk to her, right? To make her feel a little bit better about maybe joining the enforcers. Not a subtle show. And, like, part of the reason was why, like, we see them with her, and she has this silent communication with them, right? Like, where she gives them orders without a word, and they just leave. It's like, okay, you know these people. You know them very well. These people are clearly part of your inner circle. It's like, yeah. This is the next stage for Caitlyn, right? They attack her mother's memorial, right? Like, they not only did they kill her mother, now they... and it's always they, right? It is they. Not just Jinx killed your mom, and then a Chem Baron whose son was killed by Jayce took revenge by attacking him. Because Caitlyn doesn't see that. Caitlyn doesn't see this as an attack by Renna on Jayce. Or Ranni. One of the two. She sees this as an attack on her mother's memorial. So for her, this is like yet another humiliation, yet another vicious, violent act. And you can see that, like... when she says animals... she fucking means it. Right, it's... and again, she's catching herself, right? Like, you can see she's going through of, like, Vi pushes back on it. And she's like, what am I supposed to do here? Right? Like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to deal with this? How am I supposed to... because no one's helping her get through her grief. Or Vi is trying, right? But she's also guilty, right? She also feels guilty. Too guilty to really push back. So Caitlyn has all of this shit building up inside of her that she doesn't know what to do with. And Vi, the only way that Vi can really offer her support is by, okay, fine, like, I'll go help you find Jinx this one time, like, because my girlfriend is pretty and she's crying and I'm gonna do anything in the world to try and help her and protect her, right? Like, again, not necessarily a conscious manipulation by Caitlyn, but it's still, like, Caitlyn's needs, Caitlyn's grief, Caitlyn's pain, that's what's leading all of this. Vi's pain at having to, you know, kill her own sister doesn't really factor into it. Vi is just expected to give up her family, right? Expected just to kill Jinx and be okay with it and not have any complications about it because they killed my mom and that's what matters. Caitlyn is still trying to hold on to it, right? Like, she's still trying to hold on to her humanity. But then we get this fucking scene. This is the scene with the key, the computer, and we get this voiceover from her mother, who says something to the effect of, I know you have reservations about whether you're worthy of your legacy, and there's wisdom in that, but remember, you're a Kiraman, right? You are a Kiraman. You have all this power, you have all these connections, you have all these resources, you have all these privileges, these rights. And that's the thing that really starts to push Caitlyn down a dark path, is her mother's voice literally in her head saying, you're a Kiraman. You're a special family from a special people. You have special rights. And you can use this thing that we built to do whatever the fuck you want because you're a Kiraman, right? That is privilege, right? Caitlyn's behavior in this season, I think, is... And heavy as the crown is playing as well. Yes, as chat points out. Caitlyn's behavior this season, I think, is entirely consistent with a privileged person who has never really had to deal with grief and trauma, being struck by the worst day of their life, and then someone comes along and says, here's an experimental Hextech weapon and all the power in the world, take a strike force and go gas some people about it, right? Rather than someone saying, how about you go home and you grieve? How about you step away from the guns and all the levers of power and you go home and you grieve your mother's death? How about that? No one says no to Caitlyn ever, because they can't, because she has privilege, because she's a Kiraman. So all of her worst impulses, all of her deepest anger, her most vicious hate, all of her desire for vengeance, all of her desire to kill, it's all being enabled by the system, by the position that she holds in this power structure. It's all being enabled. No one pushes back. No one says no. Vi tries, but she can't because she feels guilty too, right? So when Caitlyn breaks bad in this season, yeah, like... Because one of the things is, Vi has objectively had it worse than Caitlyn. Objectively. She lost 3 parents. Caitlyn's lost 1, right? She saw them all die right in front of her. And when Vi felt all of those losses... Yeah, and 2 brothers on top of that. When Vi had all of those losses, when Vi had all of that trauma, all of that misery heaped upon her, revenge wasn't an option for her. What was she gonna do? Like, she felt it very strongly that she wanted it, and Vander talked her down, right? Her dad, Vander, talked Vi down and told her, no, like, this is gonna have consequences. People are gonna die. You can't go off on a vengeance quest because you're pissed. That's not good enough, right? Like, we don't do that. Caitlyn's dad? Oh, yes, my girl. Here's a key to all of the money and power. Go do whatever the fuck you want. Because you're a Kiraman, right? So none of this is to excuse Caitlyn's behavior, just to say, I think it is emotionally and psychologically consistent with where she grew up and what kinds of conditions she lives under, because revenge is the privilege of the powerful. It's a privilege. Like, if you don't have power, you don't get to take revenge. Caitlyn has all of the power. And so revenge is handed to her on a silver spoon, right? If Vi had been given that same opportunity to take revenge, all of those people who would be willing to go along with it to enable her, she would have been next leading a charge over that bridge. Like, she lost a lot more. I don't think she would have been stable through that. Vi has had to learn to deal with her grief. Vi has had to learn to accept things and internalize them and try and make the world a better place as it is. Caitlyn has never had to learn that lesson ever in her life. And then there's the guilt. That's the other thing in the conversation with Vi after the attack. Like, Caitlyn is like, no more reckless plans, no more going off on our own, because that's what I did last time and they got my mother killed, right? Like, Caitlyn's adventure in the Undercity in Season 1 was in part an act of rebellion, right? Like, we saw that. Like, Caitlyn wanted to do real work, to help real people, and to be out there and be a real policeman, and her mother kept just giving her the safe positions, protecting her, putting her in charge of protection of defenses at a festival, and, like, no fucking investigation. And, like, Marcus, that little worm, also kept stymieing her. She wasn't allowed to do any real work. So for her, going to free Vi, going to the Undercity, going on this little adventure was in part an act of rebellion against her mother's control and her mother's principles and her mother's ethics and values, right? So now she rebelled and killed her mother. A lot of the guilt of that is driving her towards, well, then instead of rebelling, I have to become my mother even harder than my mother was, right? I have to retreat into all of the conservatism, all of the traditionalism. I have to, like retreat into the power system that my mother lived in order to honor her, right? In order to make up for the fact that I killed her, right? That it was my fault that she died, right? It's this reactionary tendency, right? Like, where something bad happens and the reaction is to retreat into the conservative values that you think are stable, right? That you always had this guilty feeling in the back of your head by rebelling against these conservative values, you were doing something wrong. When you're in an unstable position, when you are full of grief and self-hate and misery and you don't have anywhere to put it, it's not uncommon for people to do that. And power corrupts people, and it corrupts people fast. So character design changes. That's why we have this frame. Caitlyn in the earlier scenes, she's still wearing the civilian uniform, right? Like, she's still wearing the sort of frilly, pretty, sort of civilian-esque, like, nice cop uniform, the same one as Maddie is running around with. The uniform that cops wear in Piltover, where they are there to be a decoration that makes the rich people feel safe, and not the enforcer battle armor that they wear in the Undercity when they're terrorizing and traumatizing the poor, right? She's still wearing that human little uniform. Then we get here, and like, oh, this has militarized a lot all of a sudden. Now there's a beret, now there's shoulder armor, now there's all this rank and file military dress uniform bullshit going on. Huh. Yeah, like, it's a ceremony uniform, right? She has changed her costume, and part of her personality has changed with it, right? Again, going back to the theater thing, I think costume changes in this show are going to be very important indications of, like, a character taking on a different role in the story, right? So here, Caitlyn is, like, taking those first steps towards authoritarianism, which gets her the admiration of Ambessa. But as a first step of that journey, she also forces Jayce to make Hextech weapons, even though he doesn't want to, even though it hurts him, even though it forces him to betray his friend again. Caitlyn was the one who gave the orders for that, right? And poor Vi, just like, yeah, woo, cops. I feel so good in this uniform right now about everything we're doing. I'm so happy to be here. I am excited, I am dedicated to the mission, and I am 100% sure that Jinx is definitely not my sister for sure. Right? The way these uniforms sit on the two of them, just like, Vi is so uncomfortable, it doesn't suit her at all. It's so awkward and wrong. It's good character design. Again, costume changes indicate a change in a person and a character, right? Then there's the music video, right? So the plan here is, like, we get this montage showing that Kiraman, the family Kiraman, they were very good philanthropists, right? Like, they cared about the well-being of the Undercity very much. Like, people in the Undercity, there's so many toxic factories down there, they deserve to breathe. So we should build a nice ventilation system for them. That's nice. That's a good impulse. That's like, it is definitely something that is needed to improve the quality of life in Zon. Quick question from the back. Like, if having the factories underground traps all the poison smog and kills people, what if you didn't have the factories there though? What if you took the factories and you put them somewhere where you could build really tall smokestacks and get all the toxic smoke away from people? Like, I don't know, I think the closest place to build Piltover, maybe. You could build them in Piltover so that there isn't a bunch of toxic smog underground where people get poisoned and die from it. But I guess maybe that's not an option. Okay, fine. Well, the next best thing, I suppose, is to poison the people of Piltover by building factories down there, and then build a ventilation system to fix the problem that you caused. Cool. It's philanthropy, right? It's like, ooh, climate change is going to drive millions of people out of their homes. Let's do some philanthropy and build them some homes that are on stilts so that they're not in the water anymore. Rather than, what if we didn't use fossil fuels anymore? Right. It's philanthropy, right? Like it's not ill-intentioned. It's not that someone was sitting there going, I'm evil and therefore, like, that's not what it is. But philanthropy is like, it has limits to how much it can actually address the root cause of a problem, right? Philanthropy, if you, like, for example, spend a bunch of your money to give 1,000 people a operation to cure their eyesight, that's good. It's a good thing that 1,000 people now can see. That's great. Why didn't they have access to those operations in the first place, though? Like, why didn't, like, they're fairly common, normal, ocular, like, parts of healthcare for people's eye health. Why didn't they have access to those to begin with? Why did they need a philanthropist to come in there and give them access to it? And how is it that the philanthropist gets to get brownie points and look very virtuous and cool for giving people access to something they should never have been denied access to in the first place? It's philanthropy, right? And the other thing about this philanthropy is the Kiraman family very generously built a ventilation system for all of Zaun. That's amazing. That's great. Good. That's good for the people of Zaun. They also kept the key so that if they wanted to, they could just shut it off. And that's important, right? You need to do maintenance and stuff. Of course you need to be able to turn it off, because sometimes maintenance, so of course they need to, but also we have the power to turn off your air. If we want to poison some part of the city, we have the power to do it. We would never use it. We would never use it, never. I mean, my God, that would be a horrible thing to do. We'd never use it. Never, ever, ever, but we still need to have the control, because it's ours. We built it. This is the Kiraman legacy. This belongs to the family Kiraman. We need to have the key because it's ours. It belongs to us. We built it for you, of course, for you, but it's ours. We have it. We have control over it, and we can turn it off if we want to. We don't want to, but we can if we wanted to, but we don't want to. We would never want to. Of course we wouldn't. Until one of the daughters of the family gets horribly traumatized in a terrible act of violence and decides that now it's okay to turn it off because she's mad. And, like, we can't trust the people of Zaun to have democratic control over the means of their own survival, of course. So we're just going to have to accept the risk that someone in the Kiraman family might just decide that they want to turn it off someday. But that'll never happen because the Kiramans are good. The Kiramans are special. The Kiramans would never abuse their power. They would never do that because they're special. They're a special family of good people who would never do that, ever. They would especially never decide to turn off the ventilation system as a biological weapon to allow them to carry out an extra legal execution of one of the people who lived. They would never do that. They wouldn't do that because they're good people who would never, ever turn bad for any reason whatsoever. Caitlyn does this because her mother gives her not only the power to do it, but the way she's been brought up, her class position in Piltover, has taught her that she has the right to do it if she wants to. If she wants it enough, if she's determined that this is the right thing to do, even though it might have some consequences and cost something, she can just do it because she's a Kiraman. This is her legacy. It's special. She has a right to use it the way she wants to. For the greater good, of course. Always for the greater good, and definitely not some kind of obsession with revenge. For the greater good, for the responsible behavior, right? And again, from Caitlyn's perspective, from her perspective, she's being the reasonable one here. Like, she knows the council was planning an invasion. The council was planning a full invasion of just like a military takeover of Zaun. So this is obviously the gentler option. This is obviously the more responsible, reasonable, proportional thing to do, right? She's being gentle. She's being merciful from her perspective. And the more she's stymied, the more it doesn't work, the more she's frustrated, well, the more trouble she starts to have holding on to that principle. This scene in the arcade is especially instructive there. She thinks she sees Jinx through the smog. It's not Jinx, it's just this thing. And once she learns that they have missed their target, sorry, Commander, she responds reasonably, in a way that a person who is mentally well and who has their trigger finger under control would respond. Like, by simply saying, okay, let's get rid of this poison gas, let's move on to the next target, and let's not worry too much about, oh, wait, actually, she seems to be changing her behavior a little bit. What's that? Oh, Jesus Christ! Now, as I understand it, if you have a police officer or a soldier in a squad who, like, just discharges their weapon into random inanimate objects because they got upset for a second, that's usually good. Like, you want to have that in a squad of police or soldiers. That's a good thing. That makes people safer, and it generally leads to things going well. My understanding is normally you don't say, hey, that seems really dangerous, maybe we shouldn't put that person in the field. You promote them, you make them commander of the whole thing, actually, and also dictator of the whole city, because that's a sign of stability and good rationale and the ability to think calmly and critically about the decisions that you're making. It's a sign of good mental health when you shoot bullets at things randomly in the environment around you. Right? All of this to say, Caitlyn is already unstable, right? And Vi knows this. She has seen Caitlyn grow more and more unstable, more and more cold, right? So then there's this scene. Vi is trying to do two things here, I say. Like, I think Vi wants to say to Caitlyn, please go home, right? Like, she says, let's cut the others loose, but she wants to tell Caitlyn, like, this is bad, this is changing you. I can see it changing you, but she can't tell Caitlyn to go home, right? She can't do it because she feels guilty, because Jinx killed her mom, right? And Vi knows that if someone else told her to go home, like, of course she wouldn't do it, so of course she can't say it, right? Of course she can't say that. So what she says instead, let's cut the others loose. This is really dangerous, right? Because if it's just me and you, right? If the others aren't there, maybe I can talk you, like, if you don't have to be a commander to other policemen, maybe I can talk you into, like, maybe I can hold this together, right? Like, that's what I think Vi is doing. Like, she's trying to talk around Caitlyn's feelings so she doesn't feel betrayed, or like Vi is, like, doubting her or trying to back out. Vi reassures her, my sister's dead. I don't care about her. It's another loyalty test, right? My sister's dead. I'm gonna kill her. It's fine. Like, don't worry about it. And then Vi comes with a plea, right? Like, everyone else in my life has changed. Please don't change, right? Literal tears welling up in her eyes. And this is ambiguity again, because what Caitlyn does is she goes in for the kiss, right? And she says, I won't. And it's not 100% clear if she says, I won't change, or I won't promise, right? I think Caitlyn the character means I won't change, because from her perspective, she hasn't, right? From her perspective, she's not changed. She's just reacting reasonably to the things that are happening to her. But dramatically, from a script perspective, the ambiguity is like, oh, no. Oh, she didn't say that she wouldn't change. Like, it's delicious, right? It's tragic. It's horrible. And Caitlyn, like, in this scene where Vi is very desperately telling her, please don't become extra violent and, like lose control of yourself. The kiss is both Caitlyn trying to reassure her, right? Like, it's Caitlyn trying to reconfirm their relationship, trying to say, I still love you, I still care about you, I want you here, right? I trust you, right? From her perspective, that's what she's doing. It's also not a little manipulative, I think, because it's a way to get Vi to forget about her worries and, like, stop questioning her and sort of, like, fall in line, right? It can be both things at the same time. And it works real good. The fucking glove drop. It's such a fucking Looney Tunes ass motherfucking... It's such a Looney Tunes thing, but it's so good too, because, like, how do you make dropping a pair of gloves that weigh like a ton horny? Like that. Now it's horny. And Vi, like, of course Vi, like, is receptive to this because she desperately wants that reassurance, right? She desperately wants to know that this, at least, is still there for her. That when she has killed her sister, when all of her family is dead, when she can never go back to Zaun ever again, that someone will be there for her, right? That she'll still have something. So of course, like, Vi is receptive to it. Of course she accepts that as reassurance. It's just... So, from Jinx's perspective, this scene is very much about punishing Vi, right? And Vi picks up on that right away, right? Like, Jinx is calling her out specifically. And so she says, Kate, if you see a shot, take it. She can't look her in the eye while saying that, but this is Vi saying, you can kill my sister, right? That is Vi giving Caitlyn everything she wants. And Caitlyn does appreciate it, right? Like, okay, she's on my side, we're doing this together, everything's cool. Then she gets a shot, right? Or she thinks so, on Jinx. And, just let's rest on this frame, just a sec. Pay attention to this area in particular. Interesting. Oh, hey! Hey, what's that? That looks like a petal of the same kind of color that was the one that you threw on your mother's grave, and that was also in your headspace when you were imagining murdering Jinx. Huh. Almost as though to say that, like, Caitlyn is aiming for Jinx, sure, but maybe there's something else in her vision as well. She's not entirely just focused on the shot. Maybe. Maybe to say that she's a little bit emotionally compromised here. And Vi, like, she knows that she's about to tell Caitlyn is about to take the shot, right? So Caitlyn fires. Arcane is not a subtle show. Right? Arcane is not a subtle show. When Caitlyn takes the shot at Jinx, she's also shooting Vi, right? Like, she's harming Vi as well. This is painful for her. Vi thinks her sister is about to die. Of course, things are never that simple, are they? Anyway, as Caitlyn has been electrocuted and beaten up severely by Sevika and is sort of stumbling towards the fight between the two others and raising her gun, she's definitely in a good space to fire very accurate, well-considered shots at her opponent. Like that one, for example, where she was aiming for a kill shot and missed. Caitlyn's marksmanship is on point. This is where we have to talk about what Caitlyn's shooting means. In Season 1, Caitlyn only ever fires to protect other people. Only ever. And she always hits, right? This is what shooting is for Caitlyn, right? Like, the gun shooting power, she uses that to protect other people. That is her virtue. That is her, like, that's her character, is that she's always trying to protect other people with her violence. That's what justifies violence, right? For her. When she's trying to kill someone, she's not that good at it, right? Because that kind of shooting is not really what it's for. This is demonstrated again later. The gun is pointing at Vi. She shoots to defend Vi. Perfect. Considered, precise, absolute minimal amount of damage. She's protecting someone. Perfect shot. When she's not protecting someone, when she wants someone dead. Oh, there's a kid flailing on top of her? These two people are, like, moving erratically. There's a child, like, holding onto her, putting her body in the way of the bullet. Her girlfriend is standing there, ready to... Yeah. And then she takes another shot, right? With a child on top of Jinx flailing around. And Vi just barely managed to stop her from killing a child. And Caitlyn feels so betrayed. Right? This is such a betrayal. She had her right there in front of me. The woman who killed my mother, like the source of all my pain. If I can just kill her, I can feel happy again. Like, if I can just kill her, I can make up for it. Then, like, I have taken revenge. I've done penance. I don't have to feel guilty. Everything I needed was just for that one woman to die, and you wouldn't let me shoot through a child to do it. How dare you? And Vi, for her part, is terrified, right? Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, the person I knew would never do that. Because Vi didn't know her that well yet. They've only been together for like 2 days. Or however long, you know? So Vi, for her, this is Caitlyn acting out of character. Like, she does not understand what the fuck is going on with her. And it's grim, man. I've seen people have a lot of fights online over Caitlyn about whether she's justified in what she's doing, like defending her, standing for her, being her hater, whatever it is. I don't think that's a particularly productive way to look at a character like this. Because, like, it's not about whether she's ontologically good or ontologically evil. Right? She's a cop, you know, that's a problem for your moral character always. But that's not really what this is about. This is about what kind of system produces a person who does this. Right? In Season 1, what kind of system produces a person who does what Jinx does? At the end, when she just fires that hateful anger rocket at the council and does that, what kind of system produces a person who does that? Well, a system of exploitation and abuse and trauma and suffering and poverty and no prospects of peace or change or a better life, right? That's what produces Jinx. What produces a person like Caitlyn? Well, wealth, privilege, a family that's willing to enable all of her worst impulses, a system that's willing to hand her a gun and all the power she could possibly want and the license to use poison gas on civilians if it just gets her revenge, right? No one ever tells Caitlyn not to seek revenge. No one ever tells her that she just has to accept it, that she just has to sit down with her feelings and get through them. No one ever does that. Piltover produces people like Caitlyn, right? Caitlyn, who has never had a real tragedy in her life, who's never been through real suffering, real pain, real hardship, the moment it happens to her, she has no coping mechanism, right? Like, there's no allowance for that. The only allowance there is violence, strike back, right? And this is reflected in the philosophy of Piltover itself. Our council has been attacked. That's the scenes with Sallow. Our council has been attacked. This rocket was fired at us. Everything we do to retaliate is now instantly, automatically justified because we have the power to do it, right? People of Zaun, living in pain and poison and suffering and misery and immiseration for decades and decades and decades? No. Like, how dare they do that to us? But we will strike back at them with everything. We will invade. We will flood the Undercity with cops. We will kill anyone who stands in our way. Because they did one thing to us. 100,000 little things? A million small cuts? 1,000 little oppressions? No. You can't take revenge for that. That's not justified. But one act of violence, one act of cruelty from the other side, oh, all of the vengeance is on the table. All of it. Military invasion, all of it. Children dying, it's a price that's worth paying. Caitlyn is raised in that philosophy. This is her childhood. This is what she's eaten and breathed since the day she was born, that she's a Kiraman, that she's special, that she has the right, that she has the power, that she has the privilege, that she gets to do whatever the fuck she wants when she's hurt. She gets to strike back however the hell she wants when she's hurt. And Vi stopped her. Vi dared to infringe on that right. Vi dared to take that away from her. When she's been so reasonable, again, from her perspective, I've been so reasonable. I've been trying to protect Zaun from invasion. I've been pushing back against, like, the warmongers in the council. I, like, proposed this little strike force to solve the problem with as few casualties as possible. How dare you? Like, why can't I have something now? I've given so much. I've been so reasonable. I have held myself back from so much anger, and now I don't get to shoot a child? I point the gun at one innocent, unarmed child, and now all of a sudden, I don't get to pull the trigger? Right? From her perspective, she's already given up so much, right? When it would have been so easy to just endorse the invasion and see thousands die in the streets. From her perspective, right? She's been so reasonable, and then this ungrateful bitch, right, stops her from getting the one thing that she wants. She's wrong. She's terribly, 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 terribly wrong. But you understand how she came to believe this bullshit, right? you understand who taught her that. The families that taught, like her family who taught her that. The society she lives in who taught her to be this way. And it's tragic. It's horrible, because we know Caitlyn has the capacity for kindness, for empathy. We saw that in Season 1, where she embraced Huck, this wretched of the earth, and surrendered her gun to help Vi. She has the capacity for goodness. But Piltover, as a culture, as a system of power especially, takes that out of her, right? Like, it's grim, man. Parallels, also. Vi ends Act 1 of Season 2 in the same position, begging someone not to walk away from her after they've struck her, as Powder did in Season 1. Parallels, we love them. Which, again, yeah. But yeah, no, Caitlyn is wrong. Caitlyn is catastrophically wrong. She's in the grips of her despair, and she's in the grips of anger and misery and guilt, and everyone and everything keeps enabling her to get worse. Worse and worse and worse and worse. Like, in this scene, initially Caitlyn is like, I am not going to take that. No way in hell. Like, that's a terrible idea. But then what happens? Everyone starts beating the drum for her. Yeah, this is a great idea. You should do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. It's good, actually. It's cool, actually. If you become dictator, oh, that will be so based. That will be so fucking awesome. Everyone wants you to do it. Everyone around you thinks it's a good idea. Maddie thinks it's an amazing idea, a little fascist that she is. All the other cops think it's cool. All the soldiers think it's cool. All the fucking nobles who are in attendance think it's cool. It's a great idea. You should do it. Indulge your worst instincts. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. She wouldn't have taken it otherwise. I really don't think so. But the system of Piltover, the structure of power that exists there, the enabling, the licensing, right? The willingness of this town to give her everything she needs to be the worst version of herself. And she has never had to learn to resist it. She has never had to learn to put her grief away for the greater good. She has never had to learn to do it because she wasn't raised in Zaun. It's fucking grim, man. I don't know what Caitlyn's character arc is going to be exactly. My hope is that we're going to get a parallel, right? That by the end of the season, like, Caitlyn is going to slip into this role in Act 2 in particular and take this role, eventually gonna realize that she's got so much blood on her hands that this is not worth it anymore. Like, that this was never worth it, that she's made a mistake, right? Gonna realize that this was the worst thing she's ever done in her life. Do a face turn, give up her power, have a reconciliation with Vi, you know, find some way to move on with her life. Hopefully. It's not outside the chance of possibility that she's gonna die, though. Depending on how far they want to make her the villain, she might have to die for it. I mean, she might die in a heroic self-sacrifice to, like, try and make right some of her wrongs, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Riot has insisted, oh, even the champions aren't safe from death. I don't know how much I buy that. I think when they say that, they mean Warwick, and they mean Ambessa. I don't know that they have the stones to actually kill Caitlyn Kiraman off in main canon. I don't really think so. And also, as, like, Axel is pointing out in chat, like, just dying isn't justice, right? Like, it's not, oh, she's dead. Well, cool, that solves it. That makes it okay. Like, I would be more interested in a story where Caitlyn actually has to reckon with the consequences of her actions, because that's what Jayce has to do, right? Jayce has to reckon with the consequences of how he used his power in Season 1. Renna comes for him, right? Rennie comes for him, right? Like, she comes for him and tries to kill him and, like, attacks the memorial because he killed her son, right? He has to deal with the consequences of what he's done. He has to deal with the consequences of inventing Hex Tech, of turning Viktor into the Machine Herald. He has to deal with the consequences of all of that. I would like Caitlyn to have to deal with the consequences, right? That would be the most narratively satisfying thing. Warwick, I think, is gonna die, because it's a little difficult to just let a man-eating murder monster run around in Zaun. Like, narratively speaking, it's a little bit weird to just kind of leave that dangling. I think Warwick is gonna die. I think there's an outside chance that Jinx and Vi are the ones who have to kill him. I'm more worried, though, that it's gonna be Vi who has to kill him alone. There was one shot in one of the trailers where Warwick seemed to be invading, or at least chasing down enforcers inside of Stillwell Prison. And we know from another shot that Jinx seems to be part of breaking a bunch of people out of Stillwell. So it might be that Singed comes to Jinx and gives her the option of using Warwick as a weapon. Again, if Jinx is the leader of the Underground, maybe now she has access to Singed. Maybe he's like, hey, I have a bioweapon here for you. Very effective. You could unleash it if you want to. She doesn't know that it's Vander, and then Vi is the one who has to deal with him. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah. Caitlyn might have a death flag or two. I don't believe it, but it's not impossible. So, we've got Heimerdinger and Ekko left for the champions that are in Act 1. And the trouble with those two is that they don't really get to do much. Most of what's happening with them is all set up, right? Like, we have the scene of Ekko being worried that they have too many refugees and they can't support them all. Heimerdinger just having a good time being Mr. Grandpa to the whole Undercity, which is adorable. It's lovely. He's got a mask as well, which again is this... I can't help but see that as part of all this theater nonsense, like all this theater imagery that's present in the season so far. And we get introduced to the problem, which is that the tree, which is the most important thing in the world to these people, is poisoned by something that looks really rather hex core-ish, which sets up for like their conflict, the thing that they're investigating. So we get the silly little sneaking scene with Heimerdinger, who's clearly just enjoying getting to have fun, feeling a little bit young again in Ekko's presence. And Ekko, who's maybe a little bit too tired, and who feels that the situation is a little bit too serious to be playing around with. Again, I like the relationship between Ekko and Jayce. Yes, Ekko and Jayce. I like the relationship between the two of them, which is one where Ekko is standoffish and very understandably suspicious and kind of angry, and Jayce isn't really in a mood to refute it that powerfully. Like, he also doesn't like himself very much right now. But also that they bond over their shared scientific interests, right? That Jayce explains parts of Hex technology to Ekko, and Ekko just gets it. Right? I like that the two of them seem like people who would easily be friends under different circumstances. They could have like a pretty good relationship, the two of them, if not for, you know, all of the everything. Mostly Ekko here, like, he doesn't really get to do much. Heimerdinger doesn't really get to do much. They are mostly just discovering the extent of the problem. My assumption about both of them is that they're going to spend, especially Act 2, well, doing time travel experiments, basically. They're going to spend Act 2 messing around a lot with Hex Tech technology, really trying to figure out how to reverse what Hex Tech has been doing, spawning these, like, wild runes, and figuring out, like, I think, certainly, that Heimerdinger especially is going to be responsible for figuring out what has happened to Viktor. Going to be responsible for figuring out why Viktor is the way he is now, the mechanics of how that works, and probably gonna be instrumental in, like, getting through to Viktor, like, hey, dude, something's happening to you. We need to understand this scientifically. Maybe help him out trying to, like, figure out that he has to take back control from the Hex Core. Ekko, meanwhile, like, I think he genuinely does get to be Heimerdinger's pupil in this season. I think he genuinely does get to hang around the university doing science with Master Heimerdinger. And I think we get to explore a little bit more about Heimerdinger's like difficulty with time, right? Like, because that's the commonality between the two of them. Heimerdinger sees time on this immortal time scale, right? Where 300 years to him, oh, okay, yeah, like, so a decade is nothing, right? A decade is nothing. For Ekko, every second counts. Every moment of every second counts, right? Help needs to be given now, right? Something needs to be done now. And that conflict between them, I think, is going to be interesting to watch play out. The ways in which they're going to affect each other. Because I think Heimerdinger's point to Ekko is going to be like, yes, but if you want to help people now, it's worth it taking the time to make sure that your solution is not going to make things worse, right? Like, that impulsivity can still be dangerous, my boy, right? And Ekko sort of like reminding Heimerdinger, sometimes an imperfect solution is better than nothing, right? Sometimes an imperfect solution now is better than a perfect solution after everyone's already dead. I think that's their dynamic, and that's going to be their conflict when it comes to trying to implement some kind of solution, right? When it comes to dealing with whatever fucking time travel nonsense that they're gonna do. Because they're gonna. Like, Ekko's gonna get his Z drive. Again, I hope they don't go very far with the time travel. I hope it's a thing where they go back far into the past, and then they find they can't do anything to change it because of time stream is something, right? Like, because some events are just set that they're gonna happen, or something along those lines. And then they just have to settle for the Z drive, which brings Ekko back like a minute or whatever. I hope that's how it's gonna play out. I hope it's not gonna be a thing of a whole a whole 2 episodes being dedicated to, like, trying to do time travel shenanigans to fix things and alternate timelines and all that nonsense. I hope not. But there's gonna be some. There's gonna be some time travel something or other. The extent of that, I don't know. Hopefully not too much. But that's what they're gonna be up to. Like, surely. That's gonna be the main thing that Ekko and Heimerdinger are doing. And I think, at least to start with, Jayce might be joining them, even if only to sit around and mope and become ever more sort of disheveled and bearded and pathetic and sad and useless and depressed and inexplicably hot to a huge proportion of his fan base. But yeah, the two of them, unfortunately, I just don't think they get that much to do. I just don't think there's that much Ekko Heimerdinger or anything to really talk about in Act 1. In part because, as we talked about with Arcane before, Arcane is a show that's trying to tell an entire season's worth of story in a single act of 3, right? 3 episodes to tell what another show would probably have spent a whole season going through. That compression inevitably leads to certain things being deprioritized, inevitably leads to certain things being left out, right? In Season 1, Skye's character could really have used an episode to, like, build her out a little bit so we knew more about her in order to, like, strengthen the tragedy when she dies, rather than her just being a prop for Viktor. In this season, I mean, again, I don't want to judge it before it's over, but, like, I'm not going to be surprised if by the end of this season I'm like, it could have been nice to have, like, a little bit more time with Isha. It would have been nice to get a little bit more insight into, I don't know, Heimerdinger, like, get a flashback from his past, something like that, rather than him just being Mr. Science Guy without really getting to dive into his backstory. Things like that. There are going to be trade-offs that are going to be made where some people's stories get to be told in full, and some are just kind of implication or left to the imagination without really being built out. That's just kind of inevitable to the way that a show like this is constructed and put together, when there are so many storylines to handle, when LeBlanc is going to show up now, apparently, and God knows who else. Not to mention Singed. Okay, Singed. I kind of wasn't going to bring him up in this fucking thing, but Singed also is just nothing in this first act, right? Like, and that's not a negative. Like, he isn't meant to be doing anything. He goes jungling a little bit, like, steals the Merc Wolves, and then he sits around a table and, like, pumps his, like, messes with some cells under a microscope. There's a heart that he's extracted from the Merc Wolves, and then at the end, he's just kind of hanging out, pouring his blood into Warwick for some reason. While holding, though, this is the one interesting thing about Singed here, holding the locket, which we know has a picture of almost certainly Oriana inside, which implies, on the film language level, that what he's doing here, he's doing it for her, right? That everything he's been doing with Warwick, with poor Vander's body, it's for her, right? Like, it's for her in some way. This is about her in some way. He's trying to learn how to build a body for her so she can come back to life. I I don't know. Like, I don't know how this relates to Oriana, because her body traditionally isn't biological or chemical at all. It's entirely mechanical. Like, it's entirely hex tech. More recently, it used to be just clockwork. So why all of the bio experimentation and the shimmer and this stuff? I don't know. Maybe Warwick is just supposed to be an organ farm to give her healthy organs to survive longer. Something along those lines. I don't know. All of this is just ominous teaser with very little to go by. I don't even really know what Singed's plan is for this season. Like, what's he doing? Like, what is he trying to achieve? How does that relate to anything anyone else is doing? No idea. My best guess, though, if I were to try and take a crack at speculating about Singed and Oriana in particular, if Singed is going to bring back Oriana, I think he's going to do it with Viktor's help. Because Arcane is obsessed with parallels and reflections and repetitions and cycles, right? Season 1, Viktor goes to Singed for help multiple times. A reflection of that in Season 2 would be Singed going to Viktor to get some help providing a cure for his daughter or a new body or whatever the case may be. And then an Oriana could be made who was made out of the Viktor Ascension stuff. Or maybe out of, again, if Viktor's arc is in part about learning to let go of the Hex Core and just build things mechanically, maybe Viktor is the one who helps Singed build Oriana's mechanical body or augmented body or whatever it is. Who knows? It could also just be revenge. Like, that's the other thing someone brings up in chat. He speaks of his daughter in the past tense, right? Maybe it's not about bringing her back. Maybe it's about someone killed her or something killed her, and he's just working on, like, a 20-year master plan of just how deep his revenge is going to be. Not impossible. I don't think that's Singed character, really. Like, that's not my read of the kind of character that he is. I don't think he's someone who gives that much of a shit about revenge. That doesn't feel like him. He doesn't really seem petty or vengeful as such. Singed, to me, reads a lot more like someone who sees a problem and decides to try and fix it no matter what it takes, right? Oh, my daughter is dying from a rare condition of something. Okay, I'm going to cut her into pieces and preserve her body in ice, and then I'm going to build another body for her and transfer her brain into it. Like, that seems more like the Singed kind of thing. I need to solve this problem, and I don't care what ethical boundary I have to cross to do it. Right? That feels more like Singed to me. So, assuming all of this is for Oriana, as the film language here is implying, that he's looking at her picture while doing this, like, idly sort of caressing it with his thumb, holding onto it as he's pouring his own blood into Warwick. My assumption is that this has something to do with saving her life or bringing her back, right? Something along those lines would be my best guess. Outside of that, I don't know. Singed doesn't really do anything in the first act. Warwick, though, I think is going to show up in Act 2, and I think he's going to die in Act 2 as well. Like, I don't know that he survives until Act 3. I think in Act 2, Warwick gets unleashed on Zaun, and Vi has to deal with him. Either alone, or with Jinx's help, like the two of them together, sort of symbolically dealing with Vander's legacy. But I don't think Warwick survives the season, as such. I think having a giant rage monster that kills people and eats people just running around casually free in Zaun is narratively difficult for this particular show. I don't want him to die, though. I want him to run around. I want people to get unreasonably horny about him. It's funny. Well, they're gonna do that anyway. Who cares? But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Act 1. A lot of interesting things are being set up. A lot of character arcs are going on a fucking journey and a half. Especially Caitlyn. Oh boy. I'm quite glad that we get, like, I am in fact very glad that Caitlyn is the villain. I'm glad that a good guy is the villain. That it's not just some cartoonishly evil, like Sallow, right? If it had been Sallow, it would have been a little too easy, right? It's like, Sallow is the bad guy, obviously. There's nothing to sympathize with there. He's a piece of shit. Fuck him, kill him, who cares? Caitlyn, we know that there's a real person in there. We know that she has the capacity for kindness, for empathy, for wanting the best for other people, for putting other people's needs before her own. The fact that Piltover is corrupting her, that power is corrupting her like this. I like that. That's good. That's good storytelling. That's where the good narratives come from. That's how we get those. And hopefully that's what Arcane is going to do, right? Caitlyn should not be let off the hook for this. She should have to deal with the consequences in a way that, like, costs her something. And so should Ambessa. It might be her life. She's the one I vote most likely to die because of the intro kind of telling us that she's going to vanish and Mel is going to take her place. Anyway, the people demand less. Okay, let me see if I can find her. She's somewhere in Mel's section. I have the clip. There she is. You happy now? Very good. Yeah, gotta throw them a little treat every once in a while. Otherwise, they start misbehaving. What a fucking character design. On Lest, too, by the way. Like, ooh. Like, goddamn. Like, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of character. She's, like, again, a quick character design analysis, right? Look how much she's bound up, right? Like, there's literally, like, these things hanging around her neck. All of this, like, tight stuff constraining her, ropes. Like, everything, like, tightly bound around her. Tension. There's tension in her character design, right? Tension, maybe fear, maybe the idea that she's holding something back or that she's being forced to hold something back, right? And that comports really well with her personality, which seems to be very sort of shy and evasive and like to really be careful and secretive and not letting things slip is like good character design, like very solid. For a character who's, like, surreptitious and, like, a spy who's, like, sneaky and does Batman things. Very good. Anyway, I think that wraps up my analysis and predictions based on Act 1. There's just so much fucking... I could talk for 14 hours about this shit. And I would have if I hadn't very actively held the scruff of my own neck and said, no animation breakdown. Don't do it. Not now. So I think now there's nothing really left except to say, see you for Act 2, I guess. I don't actually know if this video is going up on the main channel or the reaction channel. It's going to be on one of them. If it's on the main channel, I need to do an outro. I'll leave that for me when I'm editing the video. You can do that. For me here, I'm just going to say, Arcane! Arcane! Fucking hell! Fucking show! Fuck! God fucking damn it, Arcane! And say goodbye. Thanks for watching. Yeah, outro. Okay. Hi, hello. How do you like the 3D avatar? He's a new thing. He might show up more often. I don't know. Arcane is pretty good. I think season 2 is starting off pretty strong. I've seen a bunch of stuff going around of people talking about how it's bad writing now for whatever reason, and like, I don't know. I think it has exactly the same problems that Season 1 had, and also all of the same qualities that Season 1 had. But, you know, the show isn't over yet, and your mileage may vary. Anyway, this is going to be my life now for a while. I don't think I'm going to do anything other than Arcane for a bit. Well, I've started the Shorts channel back up. That one's uploading, so, you know. Elden Ring will be back once Arcane stops rewiring my neurons every 7 days. So, just be patient, please. Anyway, support the Patreon if you want. It gets you access to the Discord, and then you can join these Discord live streams. Coffee should also get you access, but as I've said many times now, at the moment, if you have any extra money on your hands, please consider donating it to Doctors Without Borders or the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund instead. It will do more good with them than it does with me. Anyway, yeah, I think I'll be doing recaps like this after every act, and eventually, once the full show has been out for a bit and I've had time to gather my thoughts, I'll do a review and call it a 7 out of 10. Look forward to that. Thank you for your time and your attention. Remember to be kind to one another, have solidarity with those who are struggling, and may the tides of history wash gently over us all.